Part 99. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 982. Lily's action of pushing the door suddenly woke Brian up from his thoughts. He almost jumped up. He clenched his fists subconsciously, and even the muscles in his body contracted violently for a moment. Because he was wearing soft linen clothes, so Lily could clearly see this change in him. After discovering that only Lily came in, he quickly relaxed again. A complicated look flashed in his eyes, and then when he saw the green shadow under Lily's eyes, his face suddenly darkened, and before Lily could speak, he preemptive strike. "Where were you last night?" At this moment, Lily is still undecided about the Holy Girl trial. It is definitely impossible to marry Ichiri. Li Yangzi is not in the starry sky. She will not agree to marry any character in the plot, but without Ichiri, without the help of Brian, she might not be able to complete the mission this time. Lily was upset and didn't want to say more to Brian. Now as the mission progresses, she is almost certain that her mission should be to have a relationship with Anna. At most, if you want to complete the task perfectly and become a saint again, there will be no possibility of Brian's existence in it. He was willing to betray the original owner and leave the temple for Anna's words. What is there about such a man that makes the original owner like him? If she guessed wrong, if the original owner just liked Brian, then she could only blame herself for choosing the wrong mission this time. "Please remember your identity, Mr. Brian." Lily didn't sleep all night, and she had so many things on her mind that she didn't want to say more to Brian. "My room, I hope you won't see me again when I don't come back. You just come in." Brian didn't pay attention to her indifference, but now he was as angry as a lion. He stretched out his hand to catch Lily. "Didn't you go back to Roman Manor last night? Did you go back with Arturi?" He was as surprised and angry as a husband who had caught evidence of his wife's affair. There was a look of jealousy, resentment, and anger on his face. A look of hurt appeared in his eyes. "You didn't even change your dress from yesterday. You are the candidate saint of the temple, you are the incarnation of the goddess of light. You should not be like a bitch, like those vulgar women, scrambling to get on top of that shameless man bed." He gritted his teeth. The veins on his forehead were about to pop out. Obviously, Brian was greatly stimulated by the possibility of Lily staying at Ichiri's house last night. He could hardly control his temper and seemed to be roaring at Lily. His face was originally fair. His face turned red. The red blood in his eyes almost came out. If Lily hadn't seen Brian and Anna rolling into a ball in the woods outside the castle last night, she would almost have thought that her contact with Arturi had injured Brian. "Arrive." She lowered her eyelids to block the sarcasm in her eyes. "This man hugged another woman last night and listened to Anna's words and wanted to kill her. Now he was wearing clothes and came to accuse her of being unfaithful," with a sneer on her lips. A murderous intention surged out of her heart. It was strictly forbidden to kill each other in the temple. If believers of light in the temple were found to hurt each other, the people in the temple would regard them as traitors and hunt them down for life. She listened to the announcement. Ryan cursed in his mouth and decided to take advantage of this trial trip. "Let Brian follow you and find an opportunity to kill him when the time comes." "Brian, you really make me ashamed. You are a follower of the goddess of light, but you have acquired these bad habits from somewhere. You speak rudely to me everywhere. You seem to be possessed by the devil. What should I do? I don't need you to ask. You disappeared for several nights and didn't stay by my side like a loyal knight. Where did you go? You are really disgusting now. Please get out now. I don't want to see you. If you dare to insult me again, I will tell the archbishops that you have kissed a slave girl and forced others to do so. You have violated the code of knights and want to use the name of the Temple of Light to rob the eldest prince and give him to him. Arturi's gift. If you speak evil words to me again now, I will let them judge you." Faced with Brian's scolding, Lily responded coldly, and he was speechless for a moment. The reason he didn't return to the temple a few days ago was because he went to explore the territory of the Ituri family. Ever since he first met Anna, he had been fascinated by the little wildcat. Her alluring body made him fall for it. He was fascinated by it. These days, he seemed to be tempted by the devil, making him unable to control his actions at all. Until last night, he finally got Anna's body. That feeling made him sink. In fact, his heart and eyes were full of Anna now, and he no longer only regarded the original owner as his woman like before. But even if he had obtained Anna and promised that Anna would take Lily's life, but in Brian's heart, he still hopes that Lily can keep his virginity for him. After all, he has never had a woman before. Even if he no longer wants her, he also doesn't want to see her taken by someone else. It wouldn't matter if Lily chose a worse partner. If she was reduced to relying on flattering ordinary nobles to maintain her current life, then he might feel better in his heart. But now, even if Brian tried to convince himself, he couldn't. No worse than Ituri, he even comforted himself that he was the golden armored knight in the Temple of Light. He had an identity, handsome appearance, and tyrannical strength that was admired by girls. Even Anna, who had been unwilling to leave Ituri's side, dedicated her first time to him. Brian felt that he was no worse than Ituri, but in fact, no matter how he thought he was very powerful, deep down in his heart, but Brian always knew that he was indeed no match for Ituri. The Grand Duke had a unique status, and he seemed to be the proud son of heaven. Although Anna gave him her first time, she was not willing to stay with him. She would even rather stay in Ituri as a slave girl. In the house, even Ituri didn't even look at her. This feeling makes Brian feel bad, and from a certain perspective, he should have abandoned Lily, but now he feels that because Lily has found someone better than him, he feels like he has been kicked by Lily. The illusion. She has always maintained strict etiquette with herself, and the two of them have never had close contact. But she had never refused to give her body to her before, but now she would rather give it to someone she had only met a few times, or even not return at all, even though Brian himself had already abandoned Lily, and had already abandoned him and the original owner. There was some friendship between them, but he still felt an uncomfortable feeling in his heart. But at this moment, Lily was staring at him coldly, which made him feel a little guilty inexplicably. When he heard Lily said that he wanted to report what he had done to the archbishops, his expression showed a bit of gloom. What happened between him and Anna cannot be known to the archbishop. And he also knew that what he had just done was a bit rude, but he couldn't bring himself to apologize, and the inexplicable anger and jealousy in his heart had not gone away, so he stared at Lily fiercely for a long time, and then snorted coldly. With a sound, he slammed the door and left. Wait until he leaves. Lily stared in the direction he left, her eyes narrowed. She rested in the room for half a day. After praying in the evening, Andrew stayed with her to talk. What he was talking about was indeed the Saint test trial. Because this matter was related to the emergence of the Scepter of Light, the original matter was covered very tightly. Originally, the fewer people knew about such a thing, the better. The people of the Temple of Light did not want too many people to know. At that time, the news leaked out and attracted some outsiders to covet the lost scepter. Therefore, before that, the temple was originally planning to send 3 saints and 5 knights to accompany them. Although Andrew had said conclusively that Ituri was in love with Lily, he actually had no idea whether Ituri loved Lily or not, so he held back. This most important news was not revealed until last night, after it was confirmed that the cooperation with Ituri would be successful. He just told the story. Now Lily was temporarily added to the Saints team, and one more person knew about it. Your Excellency the Archbishop, is the news about the appearance of the Scepter of Light this time accurate? Lily listened quietly to Andrew's instructions, and only asked after he finished speaking. I dare not say absolutely, but I am at least 80% sure, Andrew replied with a smile. The news this time is that we caught a heretic from the Dark Temple and used certain methods to get it from him. The information obtained is very consistent with the time when His Majesty the Pope returned to the embrace of the Goddess of Light. The location where the scepter disappeared is also similar, so it should be correct. The scepter fell to a person from the Dark Temple in the Frozen Mountains. In hand, this news was very secret. If it weren't for the fear that all the archbishops would mobilize and alert the people in the Dark Temple, in fact, there was no need to use the saint's trial as an excuse for this action. When Lily heard him say this, an idea suddenly came to mind. After thinking seriously for a long time, Lily decided to participate in this trial. If the news about the scepter this time was true, she was ready to agree to Achari's request and let him protect her and get the scepter. However, she was not ready to actually get the scepter after it was done. After agreeing to marry him, she planned to get the scepter and ask Arturi to give her a certain amount of time to complete the saint's ritual, and then find an opportunity to kill Anna and Brian before returning to the starry sky. In this way she not only fulfilled the original owner's wish, but also avoided Achari. The accuracy of what Andrew said about the scepter made her even more determined. She nodded and agreed to go to the trial. When she nodded, Andrew couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. In fact, the agreement between Arturi and him placed the decision-making power in Lily's hands. If she was willing to do this, then the situation would naturally go as Andrew hoped. If she is not willing to do this, then Andrew will reveal so much information for no reason, but the cooperation between Arturi and him will not be established. In fact, Lily didn't know that she was not the only one who was deceived this time. The conversation with Arturi last night made Andrew unable to sleep all night after returning to the temple, with his heart in the air. Until now, seeing Lily's statement, he relaxed. In that case, Miss Roman, I wish us a happy cooperation. Your knight Brian is still by your side to protect you, but this time the matter is very important. You don't need to tell him the truth unless it is necessary. Andrew warned Lily carefully. This time, the dozen candidate saints in the temple were divided into 6 groups and entered different places for trials. It was just that the other groups were covering for Lily's group. Lily's thoughts were similar to Andrew's. She didn't think about telling Brian about this, because if Brian knew the truth, then he will definitely tell Anna. She doesn't know what Anna's purpose is yet, but what she does know is that she is full of malice toward herself. Now that Andrew's words are playing into Lily's hands, there is no need for her to think of any way to remind Andrew not to tell him first. It's up to Brian. As soon as he finished talking about the business, as an archbishop, Andrew had to be busy with many things every day. Lily quickly stood up and left. 2 days later, she packed her things, and with the blessings of everyone in the temple, she took Brian with her and got on the carriage leaving Nowhere capital. The carriage left Nowhere capital city with the blessings of all the believers in the city. 5 miles outside the city gate, the carriage suddenly stopped. Brian crouched in the corner of the carriage. With a worried look on his face, when he felt the car suddenly stop, he looked a little dazed, and subconsciously asked, why did it stop? He didn't know the whole story of Lily's trial this time, but Brian felt extremely unhappy. He even felt that the various affairs in the temple that had occupied his entire mind in the past were so cumbersome that he felt a little bored. It made him breathless. He and Anna had just tasted the forbidden fruit not long ago, and if he was full of energy. He is very fascinated by Anna's body and is not willing to be separated from her for even a moment. However, since he got Anna's body a few days ago, Anna seems to have disappeared out of thin air. He has sneaked into Arturi at night these days. I searched the territory several times but could not find her shadow. I don't know if it was hidden somewhere by Achari. He has been a little anxious and restless these days. Now, just because Lily was going to undergo some saint's trial, he had to leave the imperial capital. He could no longer continue to look for Anna and followed Lily into other places for nearly 10 days. This made him feel very unhappy. From the moment he knew the news, from this moment to this moment, he has always had a gloomy face, as if he should not be approached by strangers. Lily ignored his question. He opened the car door angrily and jumped out. At this moment, the carriage had left the bustling area of the imperial capital and stopped in a small forest. Not far away, a group of people were holding the lawn. Apparently, they were here. Having been waiting for a long time, Brian didn't understand the situation and couldn't help but turn around and get angry at Lily. What's going on? Why are you stopping here? What are you doing now? Are you hiding something from me? Although Brian has been dazzled by love recently, his IQ is not low. He vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. He shouted at Lily. Lily sneered twice, pointed at the car door and shouted, "Get out. It's about 10 days. The trial time also needs to include a round trip. The place we are going to is the border of the Noer Empire. Use your pig brain to think about it. If you take a carriage, how many years, months, and days will it take to go back and forth? Don't talk to low-level people. After staying for a long time, you think that everyone wants to harm you and hide it from you? I suggest you wash your soul with bright holy water. There are so many shadows in your heart that surprise me." Brian was so scolded by her that he blushed. When he came to his senses, he realized that he had asked a stupid question. However, Lily scolded him like a slave in front of the other knights, which made him lose face at all. He snorted in embarrassment, slammed the car door with a slightly embarrassed expression, and strode towards the person holding the lawn. Hearing Brian's footsteps leaving, Lily changed herself into the attire of an ordinary girl in the Noer Empire at this time, and jumped out of the carriage. The other 3 candidate saints also changed their attires, and their guardian knights also, unlike Brian, who knew nothing about the tasks of this line of work. In order to hide from others, everyone dressed up and pretended to be a caravan, and each picked an earth dragon to ride on. At first, Brian was still stubborn and refused to change clothes. He stared at Lily coldly, as if waiting for her to apologize, but Lily ignored him at all. She saw that the other people had changed their clothes and sat down. When he got rid of the earth dragon, he cursed a few times. "Don't worry about him. If he doesn't want to go, he can stay here." The people around him stared at Lily in silence, obviously seeing something strange about the scene between the two people. The relationship between a saint and a knight is supposed to be closer than a lover or a family member. Among the saints in the temple, I have never seen a knight and a saint as stiff as Lily and Brian, but everyone just watched. He glanced at him and then turned his head away. This time, everyone can be said to be competitors. Although everyone is nominally from the same party, there are so many candidates for the saint. There is only one candidate for the true saint, so it is impossible for several of them to have a good relationship. Lily was calm on the surface at the moment, but she was a little anxious in her heart. Since she agreed to Andrew's willingness to conduct this saintly trial, she has not met with the jury again, and she doesn't know if Andrew has sent anyone to meet with the jury. Tuli said this, and now the group has begun to switch to the Earth Dragon. The Earth Dragon has a certain flying speed. Once ridden, it can reach the frozen mountains in one day. If Achuri doesn't show up again, I'm afraid he won't be able to catch up. If she travels alone this time, facing the intrigues among her accomplices, and having a man with ulterior motives like Brian beside her, she instantly feels that her heart is straight. Began to sink. Brian changed his clothes and showed up reluctantly. There are only 4 Earth Dragons in total. Although such Earth Dragons are not the powerful dragons in the legend, but just a kind of magical beast, they are also very rare in number, especially those that can be domesticated and used by everyone. They can be counted. Such Earth Dragons are mostly used in the army. If the group hadn't gone for something as important as the Scepter of Light this time, I'm afraid the Emperor might not have lent these 4 Earth Dragons. Several saints rode together with the guardian knights. Before Lily could turn over and sit on the earth dragon, Brian had already jumped up and stretched out his hand towards Lily. She didn't want to expose her back to someone like Brian who had ulterior motives towards her. Lily's eyes suddenly narrowed. Just as she was hesitating, a sound of flapping wings was heard not far away, and the speed was from far to near. It quickly reached the top of everyone's heads, and several people subconsciously raised their heads to look. A black spot in the sky quickly passed through the shade of the trees overhead, flying towards the side until it saw the figure below. The shadow retracted its wings and swooped down, and the force of the impact brought up a large number of dead branches and leaves on the ground. Living in Fiwu, above an earth dragon, Arturi, wearing a noble black velvet robe, lowered his body and stretched out a hand towards Lily. "Come here." The moment Arturi appeared, the other people who were originally riding on the earth dragon were obviously a little surprised. The sudden appearance of the earth dragon caused several originally docile earth dragons on the ground to sneeze uneasily. Several people were busy soothing the things, trying to calm them down. Since Brian saw Arturi, his face turned a little blue, and he stretched his hands straighter. "This is the temple's business and has nothing to do with outsiders. Come here," he wanted to remind Lily and make Lily realize that this long trip was an internal matter of the temple. Although Brian was impatient to go with Lily, he went out, but now Arturi's appearance clearly stimulated him. Males have a certain sense of territoriality. His eyes were very sharp, as if he wanted to eat people, and the veins on his forehead jumped. But the moment Lily saw Arturi appear, she put her hand on Arturi's hand without hesitation. Her actions caused a faint smile to appear at the corner of Arturi's mouth. Although it was quickly hidden by him, his arm only exerted slight force, and Lily's body was like a light leaf, easily pulled by him. He stood up and fell into his arms. Before Lily could sit down, he pulled the earth dragon's leash again. The docile dragon raised its head and flew up with its wings very clearly. On the ground, Brian cursed in his mouth, but he soon lost it. His ears were filled with the sound of wind. The sudden increase in speed made Lily subconsciously turn her body sideways to avoid the wind speed, and at the same time, she buried her face in Arturi's arms. In the chest. He pressed Earth Dragon's head with one hand, reached out to untie his robe, and wrapped Lily inside. The warm robe blocked the strong wind outside. Several sounds of flapping wings sounded behind him. They were Brian and others. People followed. The further north you go to the frozen mountains, the colder the weather starts to get. Lily is only wearing an ordinary skirt. When she flies up, the hem of the skirt cannot stop flying, exposing a pair of calves. Fortunately, Arturi noticed it early and suppressed her legs. He came up and pressed the hem of her skirt firmly. At first, Lily thought he didn't want her legs to be exposed, but it wasn't until she got closer to the north that she discovered the benefits of Arturi's doing this. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 983. When the Earth Dragon landed in the frozen mountains, the remaining girls were almost turned blue by the wind, and their lips were purple from the cold. The wind made the three girls tremble with their arms crossed, and they almost lost feeling in their feet. Or were carried off the Earth Dragon by their respective knights. Only Lily hid in Arturi's robe all the way, surrounded by his body heat. She even slept for a while during the journey. When she got off the ground, except for her hair being a little messy, her face was still rosy. Everyone jumped down from this place, chose a quiet and uninhabited place, and took out their things to set up camp. It was too late now, although because this mountain range is covered with snow all year round, the reflected light looked like it was still dark. It was completely dark, but there were too many dangers in this forest, and not far away was the base camp of the Dark Temple. It was no longer suitable to take risks, so a group of people decided to settle down first. Several knights took out their belongings and set up camp respectively. By this time, the competitive relationship among everyone had become clear. They did not speak to each other and only worked individually. The three saints picked up the backpacks they brought. He rummaged for linen cloth and wrapped his head and face tightly. No one wanted to say anything, but when Achuri set up the tent and pulled Lily in, Brian threw away the things with a sullen face and turned around. Walk. The few people who came out on this trip didn't bring much with them, and the harsh weather in the frozen mountains didn't seem to have any impact on Achuri. The tents set up by several people were far away from each other. This time, the news received from the Temple of Light was that the Scepter of Light was placed on the altar in the Temple of Darkness in the frozen mountains. In other words, if the people from the Temple of Light want to grab the scepter this time, then you must break into the Dark Temple headquarters, enter their forbidden area, and take the scepter from the altar. Lily only vaguely felt that Achuri was very powerful, but she had not seen him take action personally. There must be many guardians of the Dark Temple's base camp. If these few people want to take away the scepter, then it's nothing more than a fool's dream. She huddled in a corner of the tent, while Achuri lay flat on his back. It was impossible to see the expression on his face clearly in the darkness, but the warmth on his body seemed to be able to dispel the ice at the bottom of the tent, with an alluring warmth. Neither of them spoke, and the tent was extremely quiet. In the darkness, the whistling wind outside could be heard rustling the tent, and the sound of the wind blowing through the woods reached people's ears. The silence and darkness of this mountain range become more and more apparent. The show has begun. Achuri's voice suddenly sounded. There seemed to be a bit of smile in his voice, as if to confirm what he said. Not long after his words fell, there was a harsh sound. A woman screamed. Ah! The scream seemed to pierce the night sky, and Lily's body tensed subconsciously. He sat up all of a sudden and was about to go out and take a look. However, Achuri's hand accurately caught her wrist in the darkness. His palm was very warm, which highlighted the coolness between Lily's wrists. The girl's tender skin looked especially smooth because of the cold. His fingers, after rubbing it twice, she felt goosebumps on the back of Lily's hand. He opened the shed, and the people living in various places were attracted by the screams. Even Brian, who disappeared without a trace before, was among them. On the top of a huge tree, a knight who was originally pretending to be an ordinary mercenary had his head tied with a rope. Hanging on a treetop, the body was dangling. His trachea had been cut off, and a large amount of blood was still pouring out. Even though the blood that had poured out first had begun to freeze, the wound was still wet. Blood comes out. The moment he was hung up, his trachea was cut off and he couldn't scream. Although Lily was far away before that, he didn't smell the smell of blood, which proved that he had just been killed. The person who killed him hasn't gone far yet. Lily wanted to step forward to take a look, but as soon as she moved, Achuri held her tightly, and his eyes fell on the trembling saint candidate with her face covered. In the night, the skin on her face that was not completely covered by a scarf was as white as snow. There was a layer of fine frost crystals on her eyebrows. Her eyelashes were long and curled. Her pupils seemed to be filled with fear due to extreme fear. She had begun to shrink, and her body was leaning against the treetops, her legs shaking as if she could not stand still. He went out to look for water. I wanted to see him, and found. She seemed to be so frightened that she couldn't even speak. Seeing such a scene, several people were a little nervous. One of the saints fell into the arms of her knight, and tears burst out of her eyes. However, not long after the tears came out, they began to freeze when they were blown by the wind. Bing, she stammered. Here is. Before she could finish her words, the knight behind her seemed to pinch her. She quickly shut up and said nothing, but turned her head and buried her head in the knight's arms. When Lily saw this, her eyes suddenly narrowed. There was something wrong with this trembling saint. Her face was pale, not as if she was scared, but as if she was cold. And this time the temple sent out, even if the knight's strength is not at the top level, it is not much different. Even if a master can appear and kill him silently, he may not be able to do so without alerting so many people present. The most important thing is that this saint's eyebrows are covered with frost crystals, but her eyelashes are clean, which proves that she must have blinked her eyes because of nervousness before. And in the harsh environment of the frozen mountains, if she is really sad and crying because of the death of her knight, just like the saint who was half said before, as long as she sheds tears, there will definitely be some marks under her eyes. Yes, but she is clean. She seemed very sad, but just because she pretended to be so perfect, it actually made Lily feel a little suspicious. When ordinary people see such a situation, they will definitely be frightened rather than sentimental. She was sad so quickly that it was almost impossible to feel her fear and panic. The three saints all had their faces covered and couldn't see her appearance clearly. Lily's eyelids drooped, and the hand held by Arturi subconsciously pulled him tight. Everyone was silent. When we got here, everyone was in a semi-cooperative and semi-hostile relationship. Whoever gets the Scepter of Light will have a more secure position in the Temple of Light in the future. Everyone wants to be a saint, and they don't want to be someone else's slave. Otherwise, why take the risk this time? The death of a knight proved that this team would have one less competitor. The other two teams tacitly expressed some words of comfort and helped put the knight who had his throat cut and hung up on the spot. Barry, the saint, cried softly. Brian helped bury the snow, looked back and saw Arturi holding Lily's hand, and then saw that he was now helping to bury the body, and an unknown fire welled up in his heart. Isn't the Grand Duke willing to help? Seeing that a loyal knight has returned to the embrace of the Goddess of Light, doesn't His Excellency the Grand Duke want to say something? Everyone could see his malice and trouble for Arturi, but no one said a word. Arturi didn't even look at him. At that moment, he was squatting on the ground with his back against the tree and burying his face in his knees. In the middle, a very sad saint passed by, and soon her eyes fell on Lily. I am not from the temple. When Brian heard this, an unknown fire surged up in his heart. He threw away the snow in his hand and stood up immediately. When Arturi was in the imperial capital before, he was very powerful. It didn't matter that he couldn't compete with Arturi. Now he was out and about. Most of the people here were from the temple. Arturi didn't even have any followers around him, but he still couldn't compete with him. With such arrogance, Brian's eyes showed a bit of murderous intent, and his eyes fell on Lily again. She didn't know what she was thinking. Her expression was calm, but it made Brian's anger come out one by one. Since you are not from the temple and this is a matter of internal affairs of the temple, why are you here? Brian retorted loudly. The other two knights looked at the scene in front of them with some embarrassment. In fact, they were also puzzled. Untie. Everyone knew about this mission trip, but before leaving, several archbishops told them that Archduke Arturi would be accompanying them on this mission. Arturi was not from the temple. He was not even a believer in the temple. None of them understand how an outsider could get involved in such an important matter. But firstly, with the instructions from the archbishops, and secondly, Arturi's identity was there, and coupled with his loyalty to the archbishop's orders, no one opened his mouth to question it. Now Brian spoke, and although the two of them remained silent, they both turned their heads. I begged Archduke Arturi to accompany me here. Brian, you really embarrass me. She stood on Arturi's side, causing Brian's expression to darken completely, and there was a hint of anger in his eyes. He didn't know what he was thinking of, but he quickly lowered his head and didn't reply. Several people buried the knight's body. It was already getting late. Tomorrow, we will continue to search for the address of the Dark Temple. Everyone should keep their spirits up. They each returned to their own places. The girl who had been holding her legs raised her head, looking a little hesitant and helpless. Now, What should I do now? I only have one person, Miss Roman. You already have Arturi by your side. Okay, can you let Brian protect me tonight? Her eyes were like those of a deer. Although she was speaking to Lily, her eyes were looking towards Brian. People in the lowland continent do not value chastity. It is not unusual for a candidate saint to have several night lovers. However, most of the people in the temple knew about the relationship between Brian and Lily. They knew that the relationship between people is different from the ordinary knight and saint. Even if someone would wink at him behind his back, they would never speak so openly and directly. A smile appeared on the corner of Lily's mouth. She seemed to have discovered something. Something unacceptable. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come, /U003C. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 984. When Brian heard this, he frowned, but he seemed to have discovered something quickly. Under the saint's rapt face, the position of the lips was pushed up, and the tongue was exposed through the thin veil. Brian's eyes showed shock and excitement. He was not very good at hiding it, and everyone could see it clearly. Before Lily could speak, he agreed without hesitation. Of course, his tone was relaxed and cheerful, with a hint of lust mixed in. Before, he had an angry and unhappy look on his face, but in the blink of an eye he changed. His change was so obvious that even the other two knights seemed to have seen the clues, but everyone thought he had a chance to get close to this candidate saint. Didn't take it seriously. Now the saint who died guarding the knight named Brian to accompany him. Lily, who Brian was supposed to protect, didn't have any objections, so everyone naturally didn't say anything. Everyone returned to their temporary resting place. Lily entered the tent and subconsciously stretched out her arms to cross her chest. The cushions in the tent had only been away from people for a while, and they were already extremely cold. She shivered, and the darkness Zhongachalai reached out and pulled her into his arms. She struggled twice, but as he clamped her cold feet between his legs, warmth spread from him, and Lily subconsciously she pressed closer to him, and in order to avoid embarrassment, she whispered in Achari's ear. There's something wrong with her. Although Brian abandoned the temple for Anna, this does not mean that Brian is really a nymphomaniac who falls in love with women when he sees them. He has restraint. There are more than a dozen candidates for saints in the temple alone. Many. Each saint has an outstanding appearance, and with Brian's outstanding appearance and strong strength, if he is willing, many ladies in the imperial capital are willing to become his lovers and have sex with him for a while, but he not at all. In the past, he didn't pay much attention to the other saints in the temple. The reason why he was so easily seduced by Anna was that in addition to Anna's own charming appearance, she also had an unusually alluring charm. Reason? Not for everyone but Anna. Tonight, the saint who died in the night just waved to Brian lightly, and he agreed immediately, and even stopped troubled Arturi for this. This is not Brian's character. In the pitch-black space, the corners of Achari's mouth curled up slightly, and one of his hands was pillowed by Lily. Feeling her somewhat stiff body, he raised his other hand, hesitated, and gently touched her head. 3 days ago, the slave girl who kissed him disappeared. As soon as he said this, Lily subconsciously wanted to stand up. The weight on my arms suddenly became lighter, and there seemed to be something empty in my heart. He stretched out his hand and pushed her head back to its original position. He put his hand on her head and never left it. Go to sleep. Although Arturi did not say exactly that the saint must be Anna, his words confirmed this from the side. Lily couldn't sleep at the moment, and she wanted to speak again. Arturi suddenly turned his head. Can't sleep, his face was very close. The tent was a bit small, and his slender legs had to be curled up to lie down properly. He felt with some satisfaction that Lily's originally cold body began to gradually become warm under the embrace of his body temperature. At this moment, Lily couldn't see the expression on his face clearly, but Lily's every move was caught in his eyes. When Arturi spoke, his breath blew on Lily's forehead, bringing up a few strands of her hair to gently flick around her face. She seemed to be itchy, and subconsciously reached out to scratch it. He also found it interesting to see it, and couldn't help but reach out to replace it. She catches. Arturi had never felt like this before. He seemed to have found something he had lost for a long time. Once he caught it, he never wanted to throw it away. His voice did not have the alienation and indifference that it had sounded before. Listening to it now, it sounds very soft. If you can't sleep, would you like to hear a bedtime story? When he said this, there seemed to be a smile in his tone, and he was obviously treating himself as a child. Lily helplessly stretched out her hand to take his hand away, but he didn't let go. Instead, he grabbed Lily's hand into his palm and held it firmly, then put it to his mouth and pecked it gently. Once upon a time, there was a declining aristocrat. He was not a good storyteller. He told a story simply and thinly. He went from being an ordinary nobleman to marrying the daughter of another declining aristocratic family as his wife when he became an adult. After getting married, the two couples tried their best to get ahead, wear fancy clothes and jewelry, and squeeze into the upper-class society. The two couples lived on the border of a certain country, and their family had no money left. Apart from maintaining the name of a noble, there was nothing more. Just when they were desperate, the noble's wife became pregnant. The birth came at the wrong time. The two of them were poor and miserable. They relied on debts to get by. The family could not afford servants and could not pay the salaries of servants. In October, the young lady gave birth to a pair of lovely twin sisters. It's just that when this family saw the newborn baby, they didn't feel the slightest joy. Instead, they felt endless panic and fear. Not only were the twin girls not similar in appearance, but the younger sister was born 3 minutes later than the older sister. Within these 3 minutes, the lady from a declining aristocratic family had a nightmare. She dreamed that she would be swallowed up by endless darkness. She dreamed that one day she would die in the darkness. In panic, she regarded the baby girl as a heretic and an unknown thing. In the tradition of the lowland continent, twins are not an auspicious thing. The people of the lowland continent firmly believe that one of the twins must be an extremely kind, bright and promising person, while the other must be the incarnation of the devil. Will be extremely dark and will bring endless disasters to the family. If the news spreads and the temple is alarmed, not only will the two daughters she gave birth to be saved, but the noble couple will most likely be regarded as heretics and be tried and sent to the gallows. Therefore, in panic, the noble lady regarded her younger daughter as an unknown demon. She detested her, hated her and cursed her. On the contrary, she firmly believed that her eldest daughter was very likely to bring hope and light to herself. People. The couple believed that their eldest daughter would bring glory to their family in the future. They believed that one day the declining noble name would regain its glory with their eldest daughter, so they threw their younger daughter on the roadside. From then on, the lives of the two baby girls began to change drastically. A girl is as promising as they thought. This daughter has been smart and well-behaved, obedient and kind since she was a child. She is like an angel and has fascinated many people. Arturi said this. There seemed to be a smile in the voice. The other one was not so lucky, but she was very lucky. She did not die of hunger and pain after being thrown on the roadside as the couple thought. She survived. She was adopted. When Lily heard this, a chill rose up from the soles of her feet. At this moment, she had no time to pay attention to Arturi's intimate movements. She was held in Arturi's arms, but she still felt chills in her body. Was she adopted by a slave and named Anna? Arturi is not a person who likes to talk nonsense. Even though she had not known him for a long time, Lily seemed to have already figured out his character. What he said to himself inexplicably today was definitely not for a bedtime story, he casually said. She recalled what Achari had said inadvertently when he wanted to invite her back to Achari's territory as a guest. At that time, he asked himself if he had found anything interesting. Her mission this time was very strange. It's not because the mission plot is incomplete, so the whole thing seems like a mess. She spent most of her thoughts on trying to sort out the clues of the mission, and Arturai said at the time that he found something useful. Let yourself go with him to the Achari family, he would tell himself. But at that time, Lily only thought that he was trying to coax her into willingly getting into his carriage, so she didn't take it seriously. Now that she thought about it, she began to feel that something was wrong the more she thought about it. The aristocratic couple mentioned in Arturai's story are so similar to the Roman couple. Those two couples treated their daughter as if they were a money tree. They seemed to be desperately trying to squeeze something out of the original owner. When they found something useful, they used the original owner to get promoted to a noble title and entered the imperial capital. They received rewards from His Majesty the Emperor and got rid of their previous poverty. But all of this is just her speculation. If something is not confirmed, it may not be true. Arturai's mind is too complex. There seem to be 7 or 8 meanings in every sentence. No matter how he tastes, he can taste different ideas. However, he stopped mid-sentence. Lily asked him, eager to know what happened next. He just reached out and hugged her tighter. When one day you become my real wife, I should naturally be loyal to you and not hide anything. When he said this, his tone was very calm, but when Lily reached out to push him, he just laughed twice and said she was not angry because of her anger. On the contrary, she was a little indulgent. She made her impatient and came to coax her again. Okay, good girl, the bedtime story has been finished. I think you should give me a good night kiss. It's time go to sleep. He made up his mind not to talk anymore. No matter how much Lily pressed him, there was no result. Although she was a little unwilling in the end, she had no choice but to give up her plan to force Achari to speak again. Just after hearing this story, Lily's heart was in a mess and she couldn't sleep at all. If the story told by Arturai is true, and the protagonist Lily boldly assumes that the twins are the original owner and Anna, then this mission will be more complicated than before. In Lily's view, although the original owner was sent to the Temple of Light by her parents when she was a child and raised her as a bargaining chip, in the plot and in her memory, she has not suffered much or suffered anything. Although her parents have always been eager to get more and better rewards from her, they have not treated her badly. When the original owner was a child, although the Roman family was poor, the Romans still raised her as a noble girl and strictly disciplined her. Even though the family had borrowed money to survive, they still hired teachers to teach her etiquette and custom-made beautiful clothes for her. Teach her how to enter upper-class society. The Romans themselves grew up in such an environment. For them, this is the best they can give their daughter. Although they were suspected of using their daughter as a show-off in the end, they also paid love to the original owner, even if these love is nothing to Lily. Although they promoted the original owner to the major nobles, it was at best for these two couples. It's because in their concept, chastity is not an expensive thing. The relationship between men and women in Lowland is very open. A candidate saint can have several knights as her bedfellows. They can choose to become the lover of a powerful person and use the power of these powerful people. This is a common rule among nobles. They were not impressed. The original owner did not encounter any major setbacks in his life. If he insisted on having them, then the only harm would be. Perhaps it was Brian, who she always thought would be loyal to her and follow her, who was snatched away by Anna. Thinking of this, Lily finally discovered something was wrong. She had been in a misunderstanding. In every mission, she fulfilled her wish to have the original owner who was unwilling and dissatisfied. This time, She also thought the same was true. So when she entered the mission, without receiving the complete plot and discovering the original owner's wish, she began to feel that something was wrong. But this time she was not interrupted by any external force when receiving the plot. She always thought that something was wrong and tried hard to find clues. She found Anna, and she thought that Anna might be the reason why the original owner could not rest in peace. It's a pity that she guessed the beginning correctly but the ending wrongly. During this mission, no matter how Lily looked at it, she felt that the original owner was not the one who needed to complete the mission. Although her life was not perfect, she was already much better than Anna, who became a slave girl. Even if she is held in the hands of her parents as a pawn, even if she loses Brian. At most, it's just a little emotionally hurt. The lack of plot this time is not necessarily due to some kind of mistake, as Lily thought before, so she didn't receive the complete plot, or she lost important plots. As for the part, she began to guess at this moment that maybe the real plot really only ends here. The original owner does not hate or resent Anna, and it is not necessarily because the plot did not progress to the end. It may be true. She doesn't hate Anna. If Lily's conjectures are correct, then the question arises, if the task does not belong to her this time, then who should it belong to? She thought of Anna. Compared to the original owner, Anna's existence was more like the target of her previous tasks. Anna became a female slave. She was sent into the arena, where she fought with evil wolves, but they were all children of the same parents. It would be fine if she didn't know the truth, but if one day she knew the truth, woolen cloth. What if she knew that she should be a proud noble, but because her twins were born a few minutes later than her sister, she was ruthlessly abandoned by her parents. She fell from a noble to a humble slave girl. The sister who has the same mother and the same blood has become the candidate saint of the temple. She is aloof and circulates among the nobles. She is the lowly life fighting in the arena. In order to survive, to eat, and to bury her belly, she needed to fight the evil wolf, but her sister sat in the stands with a proud nobleman, watching her wandering between life and death, and how embarrassed she was. This unwillingness will destroy the good thoughts in a person's heart. If she didn't know the outcome, Anna might accept her fate, but if she knew the outcome, she would definitely be resentful. And most importantly, if Anna dies in the end, according to Lily, the more unwilling a person is, the more likely it is that she will pay the price of her soul to summon someone to help her fulfill her wish. Lily's whole body tensed up as she recalled the scene that day during the dance, in the birch forest outside the castle, when Anna crossed her legs and told Brian with a smile that she hoped he would kill her. It is possible that this time she is not the one who completed the task, but is very likely to be the one who was asked to complete the task. There is a great possibility that she has entered someone else's mission and become the target of another missioner who wants to kill her to complete the mission. If all Lily's guesses are true this time, and if the source of the premise of the story mentioned by Art Uri really refers to the original owner and Anna, then Lily was wrong from the beginning. She positioned herself as the one who completed the mission. She regarded herself as the hunter and Anna as the prey. But it was not until this moment that she discovered that it was possible that she had just entered someone else's mission, and she had become one of them. The chess piece killed by the mission, she was not a hunter from the beginning, but became the prey in the eyes of the hunter. No wonder she felt a little powerless in everything this time. She felt that her strength was greatly reduced. I have been practicing the Tao Te Ching for several days, but I have not made much progress. Her mental power has been severely suppressed, and she has been greatly influenced by the original owner. She is often easily disturbed, and she even cannot receive the complete plot in her opinion. If all these speculations are true, then all of this, the fundamental reason is not that there is anything wrong, but simply that she is not the one who received the complete plot. In popular terms, she has changed from the protagonist to a supporting role. And he just became a supporting character who would be revenged by the missionaries who knew the original plot and received a lot of memories. Thinking of this, the hair on Lily's back almost stood up. She had never encountered this kind of situation since she had been doing missions for many years. She had met other missionaries during missions, but she also had a complete plot at that time. Therefore, she can easily detect the difference between the tasker and the original owner, and she can be vigilant. She has a certain advantage, so she can kill the tasker before he takes action. But this time there was no sign at all, even because Anna only appeared by name in the plot. So she couldn't find anything weird or different about Anna at all, and she didn't have any more doubts or associations about Anna. If it weren't for the story Arturi told her tonight, she would still be kept in the dark, her strength would be weakened, her mental power would be suppressed, and she would even be affected by the original owner. Is this what Li Yangzi said at the beginning, that as the task progresses, the task she has to do will only become more and more difficult? If all her guesses are true. So does it mean what I think this time? Is it possible that some advanced saintess or something may not be the original owner's wish at all? She just needs to ensure that she lives well? Lily was so upset that she couldn't sleep at all. She tried her best to calm down, but with so many things in her mind, she couldn't sleep at all. She reached out to push Ichiri's chest and couldn't help but ask him, "How do you know these things?" "I made up the bedtime story, do you like it?" He didn't reply for a long time, and after a while he answered this question. Lily was stunned for a moment, and then a little angry. He seemed to have said everything, but said nothing, which made Lily a little anxious. This was related to her life, so she was inevitably a little anxious. This kind of confusion, it felt so bad that the truth of this news would affect every decision she made. If she chooses to believe Arturi, as long as she saves her own life and ensures that she does not become the target of Anna's revenge, then she will have completed her mission this time. But if Arturi's words in this mission are really what he said, and they were just made up randomly, then if she gave up becoming a saint just to survive, this mission will be considered a failure again. Similarly, if Anna is really one of the missionaries this time, and can accomplish such a mission, facing her, Anna cannot be worse than her. She is now suppressed a lot, and it is very likely that she will die in Anna's hands. Here again the mission reached an impasse. No matter how calm Lily was, she started to feel a little depressed when she thought about this time. She couldn't help but raise her voice, "Achuri." "Madam, I heard it," he still answered so unhurriedly, with a slow tone unique to aristocrats. Lily's anger resisted in front of him, as if he was fully contained in this voice. He seemed to be the aloof god, always looked so calm when he saw the mortals in front of him begging, crying, and scolding. Except for his hands that were hugging him tighter and tighter, Lily was so close to him, even through the thin shirt under his hands. She could feel the frequency and sound of his heart beating, but she couldn't figure out his thoughts. She was a little frustrated and helpless. Her anger had no effect on him, and even her emotions seemed to have no effect on him. Lily began to feel a little depressed for no reason. She stopped struggling and didn't speak. The hand that was pushing his chest began to loosen its strength, and she seemed to accept her fate. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come. P.S. 2 updates in 1. I haven't been in a good state recently, maybe because I'm too tired. It's my fault that I didn't write the feeling you want. I'm sorry, everyone. Kiss. Thank you to those who have always tolerated me, I love you. So today I have both updated into 1. But in order to retaliate against Yinner, who said I was verbose, I kept silently writing down the names of these children's shoes in a notebook, so I cut out the most crucial little plot, ha 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 ha. Dabio, see you tomorrow, la 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 /U003C. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 985. But Lily's silence made Ichiri sigh helplessly. There was confusion in his eyes in the darkness. As if by instinct, he reached out and tucked the broken hair on her cheek behind her ears. He raised Lily's chin and touched her lips with a mysterious touch, as if there was something wrong. Instinct drove him to do this. The first time she hid, but the next moment Arturi held her cheek with his hand, gently but firmly holding her cheek up, causing her to raise her head. He lowered his head and touched her soft lips. The moment he touched it, something familiar and intimate seemed to pass through his mind. It seemed that this was not the first time that he had done such a thing. It seemed that some things that he had sealed began to flash in his mind due to the contact of his lips. He instinctively brushed her tightly pressed lips with his tongue. The soft and warm touch of his lips, accompanied by his breath, did not bore him as much as he imagined. On the contrary, he inexplicably wanted more. But he was already like this, and she still wanted to hide. Arturi's body was as flexible as a cheetah's and he rolled over to suppress her. He intertwined his hands with hers and pressed her arms over her head. She couldn't let go, and a quick and dissatisfied hum came from his nostrils, warm. Breathing and lips and teeth connected, she struggled desperately, like an enraged little beast. She bent her legs and wanted to kick him, but as soon as her legs moved, she was trapped between his legs. Arturi raised his head. The soft body beneath him was breathing heavily due to the lack of oxygen before. Lily's chest couldn't help but rise and fall, and her breasts, which were so soft and felt better than fine cotton, followed her breathing. Pressing tightly against his chest, the hardness of his body became even more evident. He narrowed his eyes. There was a dark luster in his eyes, as if he was sure of something. He seemed to have tasted the delicious food. He grabbed her hands and placed them on both sides of her cheeks to prevent her from turning her head, and lowered her head again. If someone had told Arturi before that there was something called fate that seemed to have been predetermined a long time ago, he would not have listened to such nonsense, but now he began to believe it. He felt like there was something brewing between him and Lily. He couldn't describe the inexplicable feeling, but he could feel it. The girl below him stared at him with wide eyes. He licked Lily's lips with unfinished thoughts, feeling as if the fire in his heart was getting stronger and stronger, but he couldn't find the exit point. There was a bit of annoyance in his eyes. But Lily couldn't see it. Even in the darkness, Arturi's eyes still landed on Lily's face accurately. After a while, he suddenly relaxed the palms that suppressed Lily's hands, and he was no longer like he had just been. Holding her fingers tightly, she immediately seemed to be avoiding the plague. Suddenly he rolled to the corner of the tent, preferring to cling to the cold thin layer of tent. Nor would he come near him again. Both of them gasped, and neither of them made a sound. After a long time, Arturi lay down and stretched out his hand to Lily. Come here. He calmed down his anger for a while, and finally he suppressed it. At this time, although he had calmed down, he still felt something was not quite right. There was patience in her voice as she spoke. Lily naturally refused to go, but at this moment Arturi had no intention of letting her refuse. There was one less person in his arms, and the small tent seemed to be completely empty. He stretched out his hand and accurately grabbed Lily's wrist that was trying to hide. With just a slight force, he dragged her back into his arms. This time he didn't do anything drastic. He just pressed Lily's legs between his legs, put one hand under her neck and hugged her shoulders, and put the other hand on her back. He felt that her body was tense, obviously. Feeling a little frightened by what had just happened, Arturi reached out and patted her back gently, as if coaxing a child. He had just suddenly gone crazy, and now he was irritating and coaxing him like a pervert. Lily was very angry. After such a toss, her body that was still cold before became warm, and her palms began to feel warm. She died. She clenched her fist tightly, her lips were still slightly numb, and the remnants of his breath were still on her lips. Even the air she breathed smelled of him, and she could even feel the licks he had made with his tongue before. The indescribable feeling between her lips and teeth caused Lily to grit her teeth tightly. The hand he originally placed on her back held her fist against his chest in his palm, gently but firmly holding it. She spread her fingers and clasped her fingers together again. He came over with his lips and touched her forehead lightly, his tone was gentle. "Go to sleep." Lily didn't accept his favor. She thought she couldn't sleep at first, but she didn't know whether she was too tired during the day or whether she could rely on a warm embrace in the ice and snow. That kind of temperature was very comforting. A feeling of exhaustion came to her heart. The whistling wind around her and the quiet night were very relaxing. She didn't even realize that although she was angry with Arturi, for some reason, she was not attracted to his embrace. But she didn't feel disgusted or disgusted. She didn't know when she fell asleep. Anyway, when she woke up in the morning, she huddled in Arturi's arms. A thin blanket wrapped the two of them together, and her feet were always warm because of him. He was snuggling up against him but not cold. In order to keep warm, she even put her hands into his chest at some point. The shirt he was originally wearing was a little messy by her rubbing, and several buttons were unbuttoned, revealing his strong and flat chest. Seeing such a scene as soon as she opened her eyes, Lily felt a little embarrassed. She rarely encountered such unexpected situations. She fell asleep for some reason last night. She even untied other people's clothes and put her hands into other people's homes. "I don't even know about my chest." She raised her head and glanced at Arturi. He had his eyes closed. It was already dawn outside. The frozen mountains were covered with snow everywhere. It dawned very early. With the light, she saw that Arturi's eyes were closed. As he stood, the blue, slightly ruthless eyes in the past were closed, revealing the deep eye sockets. A few strands of his hair hung down on his face and forehead, as if he hadn't woken up yet. It was just the movement of Lily's hand that made him subconsciously press Lily's hand on his chest. He still had his eyes closed, but a hand on her shoulder hugged her and pushed her away as if it had self-awareness. He came closer and touched her forehead with his lips. He didn't even open his eyelids when he did all this, and the next moment he pressed Lily's cheek to his chest, and his tone was a little gentler than usual. "Lie down for a while." "I won't sleep." Lily shook her head. She was a little embarrassed by the close relationship between the two. If she hadn't wanted to live with Brian when she was choosing a tent last night, she wouldn't have chosen to sleep with Arturi. When we got together, what happened next happened. Fortunately, Arturi was still a gentleman and did not do anything more drastic. There was a sound outside gradually. It was obvious that the other people had already stood up, and Lily also wanted to sit up. Arturi suddenly opened his eyes. His expression at this moment was not as lazy and relaxed as before, and he had a pair of blue eyes. A bit of anger flashed in his eyes, and he silently allowed Lily to take her hands back from his chest. He buttoned them slowly and slowly, but his eyes fell on Lily, watching her adjust her clothes. This feeling is very strange. After yesterday's interaction, there seems to be something even more different between the two. He likes to see her show such a side in front of him, as if he has seen the scene before, but he doesn't like it. It seemed that he had forgotten it. When he thought about it carefully, he couldn't remember it at all. Arturi could only think that he was overthinking it. The remaining 3 pairs of knights and saints have already begun to pack up their tents. After all, the total time to complete this mission is only about 10 days. From the time they left the Noer imperial capital, preparations for the Light Festival have begun. They have to start the process. They have to rush back during the Festival of Light. Time is tight. If you can, try not to delay. After a night, the tent was piled with snow. The group of people were not prepared to ask for these things. This frozen mountain range was the headquarters of the Dark Temple. If they brought these cumbersome things, it would inevitably affect several people. The speed of people traveling is also due to the bad climate and geographical environment here. Although the few knights are extraordinary in strength, the ladies have relatively weak physical strength. We can no longer use these useless things to consume everyone's physical strength. Everyone hopes that they can quickly find the address of the dark temple mentioned by the archbishops, break into their altar, get the scepter of light, and then summon the earth dragon to leave quickly. The map given by the archbishop said that this place has just entered the frozen mountains. The location of the dark temple was learned from the disciples of the dark temple. It is not far from the west side of the entrance to the frozen mountains. He died last night. The saint who became a knight covered her face, revealing only a pair of eyes. A few strands of curly chestnut hair playfully emerged from the scarf around her face. Her graceful figure and most of the skin on her body were covered. But as soon as she finished speaking, everyone looked at each other involuntarily, and the exposed eyebrows of the other two saints wrinkled up. According to rumors, although the goddess of light and the goddess of darkness are both daughters of the Creator God, because light and darkness have always been opposites, the two goddesses are not in harmony, so that among humans, the temple of light and the temple of darkness are both the same. Rivals, when people from the temple of light refer to the believers from the temple of darkness, they usually don't use the mild term believers. Instead, they call them heretics. This saint actually calls the people from the dark temple believers, which is unavoidable in the hearts of the two saints. She was a little suspicious, but she suspected that it was because she was in a trance because the personal knight died last night and wanted to complete this task quickly. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 986. This saint is right. Archbishop Andrew gave Lily a simple map when she left the imperial capital. From the captured alien port of the Dark Temple, she learned that the Dark Temple is indeed located at the western entrance of the frozen mountains. It's just that the mountain range is so big, even if it's just to the west, it's not that easy to find. The only way is to slowly look in that direction. However, if this saint is really Anna pretending to be, and if Lily guesses correctly, she is indeed the main task person this time. Lily believes that Anna must have accepted some plot that she does not know about. As for why she came to this frozen mountain range, and she was most likely disguised as a saint, it was probably for the scepter of light. If Arturai's story is true, Lily's guess is also correct. The original Anna must have hated and envied the original owner, a sister whose fate was completely different from hers. If she died miserably in the end, if she wanted to, the best way to take revenge on the Romans is to prove that she is better than the eldest daughter that the Romans like. Maybe she wants to become a real saint and make the Romans regret it. It's just that everything is based on Lily's guessing at this moment. There is no basis for real facts, and countless variables may arise in everything. She followed a tree. When they got off the Earth Dragon yesterday, they originally landed on the west side of the frozen mountains. Now they were going to search in the forest. They all wanted to suggest that they split up and search separately. No one dared to speak first. If they search separately, once they find the site of the Dark Temple, it will prove that this pair has a chance to get the scepter of light first. In comparison, nature has superior conditions. Such a good thing is all due to luck, but the bad thing is that if it is not you but someone else who finds the temple, naturally the other people will be a little unwilling. The most important thing is that although the saints of the Light Temple practice the spiritual laws of the Light Holy Scriptures, which are specifically designed to defeat the Dark Temple, no one knows who there are in the Dark Temple. If they really encounter a powerful enemy, their accomplices will not be around. Not only may you not be able to eat mutton, but you may also get into trouble. At this time, the saint who was most likely Anna's fake one spoke. Together, we first found the site of the Dark Temple. After entering the temple, we first eliminated the believers in the Dark Temple. Then everyone will rely on their own abilities to find the right to light. Staff, how about it? The method she proposed made people's hearts move involuntarily. Except Lily, the other two saints agreed. At present, it seems that this method is the most beneficial to everyone. Although Lily did not say anything, several people subconsciously ignored her opinion. After all, the original search for the Scepter of Light was an opportunity for the three candidate saints, that is, this shows that the candidate for the saint was most likely decided among three people, but one more person was added for no reason. The other three people were still somewhat repelled and hostile towards Lily, but they didn't show it at this juncture. What do Grand Duchatory think? Several people agreed. The saint reached out and pulled the veil covering her face and asked. Her voice was a little unclear through the mask, but the sultry charm at the end of the words was revealed. Achuri glanced at Lily, Lily nodded, and the saint turned her head away. The group of people decided to head towards the mountains. There was a lot of frozen snow in the ground, and a cold feeling came out from the soles of the feet every time they stepped on it. Several knights kept chanting the holy scripture of light. There was a golden fighting spirit exuding from the body. I don't know if a few of them were lucky or they bumped into each other by mistake. After walking for an unknown amount of time, they could actually see a mountain on the top of an iceberg in the distance that was almost covered with ice and snow. The outline of the castle appeared in front of several people. Seeing such a scene, everyone couldn't help but cheer up. Looking from here, although there is still some distance from the opposite side, it will take at most half an hour to get there. At the beginning, everyone was worried that there would be heretics in the dark temple, but when they reached the foot of the mountain, they saw the winding stairs that were covered with a thick layer of ice, and it did not look like anyone had stepped on them. Look like. Several people climbed up with difficulty, and when they reached the front of the castle, a huge white jade statue of a voluptuous half-naked woman appeared in front of everyone. There were surprises in their eyes. If everyone was still doubtful at first. But now that they saw this statue, everyone knew they were on the right track. With this statue of the Dark Goddess here, it is certain that this is the headquarters of the Dark Goddess Temple. There was a strong wind blowing all around, but the statue of the Dark Goddess seemed not to be affected at all. The female statue itself was not very tall, but the throne was about 3 meters high. Her perfect figure was now half-sitting gracefully. On the throne, several strands of long hair hung down to cleverly block her two towering peaks. The ends of the hair fell vertically down between her legs, completely covering the secret place between her legs. The slender waist is in excellent proportion to the slender body. Even if it is just a statue, it is carved vividly. There is a seductive smile at the corner of her mouth. Even though her eyes are just jade, they exude a breathtaking beauty. Come on, she had a strange allure. After reading it, several knights lowered their heads with red faces and recited the holy book of light in their mouths, not daring to read any more. The statue exuded indescribable charm. At this time, the knight did not dare to look directly, making the smile on the corner of the statue's mouth look like irony. Arturi did not dodge his eyes. Instead, he looked at the statue up and down several times. He wondered if he had found anything interesting. He slightly raised the corners of his mouth, then turned his head away and lowered his gaze. On to Lily. To everyone's surprise, although everyone found the dark temple, there seemed to be no heretics here. The entire castle seemed to have not had believers for many years. The castle looked very dilapidated, and the locks on the doors had even worn out. It was rusty and covered with a thick layer of snow. It was hard to imagine that the Scepter of Light would be enshrined in such a place. Is the information wrong? Seeing this scene, a saint with her face covered suddenly spoke, with uncontrollable disappointment in her eyes. They have endured so much hardship to get here. The purpose is to find the Scepter of Light and become a saint after returning. But if something goes wrong now, this trip will be equivalent to running away in vain. The temple may use a dozen other saints as a cover to seize them. By sending them to this frozen mountain range, it is also possible to use them as a cover to send other people to a place where there is a true Scepter of Light. Impossible. As soon as she finished speaking, the saint who killed the knight last night categorically denied it. Her firm tone made the others stunned, It can't be wrong. Darkness. The temple has long declined over the years, and it is possible that these believers have moved to other places. In any case, you should go in and have a look. She's right. As soon as the saint finished speaking, Brian, who had been silent all the time, nodded. Whether the information is wrong or not, you have to go in and take a look before talking. Brian's handsome face was now filled with gloom. I don't know if it was because of the weird weather in the frozen mountains, but his eyes looked like deep pools, full of murderous intent. Now that Brian had said this, the others were naturally unprepared. The knights of the two saints discussed it and looked at Arturi again. They all decided to go in first and talk later. The door lock of the dark temple was already rotten, so Brian stepped forward and squeezed the lock off. Push the door open smoothly. When the door creaked, a rotten smell came out from the hall. The house that had not been ventilated for a long time exuded a dull and unpleasant smell. The air inside was very turbid, but for the ice and snow outside, for everyone who had been in the room for a long time, the air in the room was obviously much warmer. Once they found the dark temple, the relationship between the few people gradually became a little subtle. A saintly girl pulled off the veil covering her face that was covered with a lot of fine ice and snow, and took a deep breath. Her originally fair and delicate skin was blown red by the wind, and her lips were trembling with cold. Now I want to go around. Do you have any other places you want to go? As soon as she finished speaking, the other saint shook her head. I also want to go here. This place looks huge. It will take some time to completely search for it. She made it clear that she did not want to continue walking with everyone. It was most likely that Anna was pretending to be a saint, and she reached out and touched the scarf on her cheek. Gently he laughed and glanced at Arturi. This place has always been the headquarters of the Black Temple. I think we should be more careful. Why don't the Grand Duke and us stay here for the time being? Let the three knights check first. Is there any danger here? What does the Grand Duke think? The saint who started to speak couldn't help but hesitate a little when she heard what she said. After all, although this place seems to have been deserted for a long time, this is the Dark Temple. No one can say whether there is danger in it. If we separate rashly, it is indeed very possible to encounter danger. It's just that a few people came here for the Scepter of Light. Such a thing is too important. Everyone hopes to discover its existence as soon as possible. Therefore, as soon as the saint said this, the other two saints hesitated. They shook their heads, but for safety, they were willing to go with the three knights. Regarding this result, the saint didn't seem to care, and spread her hands. Although the two saints looked a little embarrassed, they still followed the three knights and left the gate behind the castle, leaving only Lily and Arturi, and the saint who made the suggestion stayed. What about the Grand Duke? The saint glanced at Arturi, but Arturi ignored her. Lily pretended not to hear her question, and now began to look at the ruins of the Dark Temple. It looked very dilapidated. The Dark Temple did not originally have as many believers as the Light Temple, and in addition to the relationship with the Light Temple many years ago, in the battle in the temple, not only the Temple of Light lost the saint and the Pope, but the Temple of Darkness also seemed to be severely damaged. The main hall here is extremely wide, and the 5-step low stairs on both sides are covered with dust. The high throne has no shadow of the person sitting on it. This kind of lonely prosperity can imagine the past scenery after its decline. What it should look like. I also want to go for a walk. She glanced at Arturi, but Arturi didn't say anything. He just held her hand tighter and walked towards the throne. She struggled twice but failed. She had to take it off. Seeing this scene, the saint who stayed behind narrowed her eyes, and there was a sharp light in her eyes. She then lifted up her skirt and walked up. The throne on the high platform was about 3 meters wide. There was a thick blanket on top, but it was covered with dust. She stretched out her hand to brush the dust off, then pulled up a piece of carpet next to her, and suddenly said, "Damn weather, it's so cold." The surroundings were quiet, so quiet that it seemed a little strange. The girl's voice was originally very pleasant, but now it echoed back and forth in the hall. It also showed a bit of weirdness and desolation for no reason. "Let's light some fires." As she spoke, she took out the lighting equipment from her arms, and the fire quickly flashed across. Although these old blankets had been lying here for several years, they burned very quickly. The temperature has risen. As the fire grew larger and larger, a smell of burnt smell also floated out from the fire, mixed with a few traces of dust like pink mist floating in it. Lily quickly noticed something was wrong, but she couldn't tell what was wrong. The stench of the burned cloth covered everything else, and she glanced at Ichiri. His blue eyes narrowed dangerously as the temperature increased. For some reason, Lily began to feel her heart beating faster and her body seemed to be getting hot. She licked her lips dryly, and an inexplicable heat spread from her body, limbs, and bones. She would be really stupid if she didn't know that she was trapped this time. This was not the first time she had been hit by an aphrodisiac. Her eyes turned towards the saint. There was something strange in this fire, but luckily Lily had been guarding against the saint before. Therefore, he did not open his mouth to take a deep breath. Although he felt something strange in his body at the moment, the situation was not serious yet. Lily had been guarding against the saint who might be Anna. She thought that she would most likely kill her, but she never thought that she would give such a medicine. She quickly held her breath, while Atu on the other side Lee didn't seem to feel the strange atmosphere here. The firelight reflected in his blue eyes, giving his eyes a fiery red color. "Sir, don't you come and sit for a while?" The saint patted the throne clean, sat on it, and sighed. "It's really warm here." After she finished speaking, she lay down on it. The big throne she lay on was bigger than the bed. As she lay down, her skirt fell down, revealing a pair of slender feet and a small section of graceful calves. The movement of her lying down showed the curves of her waist and hips, which were undulating like mountains, full of temptation. Ichiri ignored her and just stretched out his hand to pull Lily closer. The woman laughed softly. Through the firelight, she saw that although Ichiri's expression was calm, fine lines had begun to appear on his forehead. A few strands of hair were wet with sweat beads and stuck tightly to his forehead, showing a messy and decadent beauty that was completely different from Ichiri's usual. The woman laughed softly. She was lying on the chair, her legs seemed to be exposed, her chest rose and fell gently, her posture was full of charm, but her eyes revealed an indescribable coldness. At that moment, it felt as if the seductive dark goddess from before was resurrected on this throne. A sound like a silver bell rang in the temple. At the back door of the dark temple, the sword he carried with him had long since disappeared, and he was only wearing a suit. Brian in golden armor came out from behind the door. He quickly noticed the beautiful scenery above the throne, his eyes lit up and he walked over. When footsteps sounded in the empty hall, Lily subconsciously looked back. Brian came back alone. The two pairs of knights and saints who went with him had disappeared now. As he walked, nearby, a bloody smell wafted out from his body. "Aren't they back yet?" Brian's eyes swept over Lily and Ichiri, looking at them with expressions as indifferent as dead people. He walked towards the saint on the throne, half knelt in front of her, reached out to pull her hand up, and lowered her head. The fire was roaring, and the smell in the air became stronger and stronger. Ichiri's cheeks began to blush slightly, his eyes began to darken, and a lot of sweat began to form on the palms of Lily's hands. "Not long after I went out with them, those two people separated from me. I couldn't find them." Brian seemed to explain a few words. He didn't look back. The saint's hand was held in his palm. The two of them exchanged a look. When Brian tilted his upper body, as if he wanted to kiss her, the saint's exposed legs stretched out and pressed against Brian's chest, stopping his move to get close. He turned around as if he was a little angry, and stared at Ichiri fiercely. His eyes were like a ferocious wolf, reflecting the firelight. His expression was a little ferocious, and after a long while, he lowered his gaze. When it came to Lily, some gritted their teeth and shouted. "I have something to tell you." After he said that, he reached out to pull Lily. Lily subconsciously put her hand on her back to avoid it. But although it was warm here, an inexplicable smell rose up with the thick smoke in the venue. Lily really wanted to leave. She couldn't stay in this place. She moved the hand she was holding with Achuri, indicating him to get up quickly. Achuri sat still but did not move. The saint on the throne suddenly laughed. "Are you warm? Brian, can you leave for a while?" She raised her charming eyes, and her eyes first glanced at Achuri, and then fell on Brian. As soon as her words fell, Brian's face became more and more ugly. He once again wanted to reach out to pull Lily, but Lily had already heard that something was wrong. Brian no longer concealed his true face at this time. Seeing Lily dodge again and again, as if he was a little angry, he drank with a gloomy face. "Can't you get up? I told you, I have something to tell you." There was unabashed murderous intent in his eyes at this time, and he was obviously not going to pretend anymore. Although there were problems around the fire, it was always safer to stay with Arturi than to leave with Brian. Too much, Lily couldn't help but her cheeks turned red. She stretched out her hand to cover her nose and asked, "Brian, where are the others? Have you betrayed the temple?" If the other people were still alive, it would be impossible for Brian to reveal his true face so openly. He no longer even wanted to hide his relationship with the saint on the throne. Lily was already sure that this woman was Anna. Although she didn't know why Achuri didn't react at this moment, but she still stayed close to Achuri. When the woman on the throne heard her words, her eyebrows were raised, and her eyes showed a bit of contempt and pity. Brian subconsciously looked back at her, with a look of struggle in his eyes, and did not dare to look at Lily's face. After a long time he whispered. "What nonsense are you talking about? Come down first and I'll tell you later." After he finished speaking, he wanted to reach out. At this point, since neither of them wanted to pretend anymore, Lily naturally took off her sleeves, covered her mouth and nose, and bumped Achuri. "Sir, there is something wrong with this fire." "Finally found out? It's a pity that it's too late. I think the Grand Duke may have lost his patience now on the throne." The saint no longer pretended to have her accent. She changed from the low voice at the beginning. With a soft and charming voice, she even grabbed the hem of her skirt and began to slowly lift it up. When a pair of straight and crystal breasts were exposed, she rubbed her legs unbearably, stretched out her hands and began to twist behind her, untying her legs. "Unbutton your back." Such movements made her breasts extremely obvious, and her waist twisted into an exaggerated curve. Brian, who had just returned not long ago, saw his eyes wide open and his teeth were already chattering. Golden fighting spirit burst out from his body. Under such circumstances, Achuri seemed to have no reaction at all. The situation was obviously not conducive to him, and Lily began to curse her mission this time in her heart. If it weren't for the fact that she knew too few clues, she wouldn't have been so passive. If she hadn't guessed wrongly that she had changed from a tasker to a person being tasked, she wouldn't have thought that she was going to complete the mission of the original owner. "My wish is to become a saint and cooperate with Archbishop Andrew to come here." Arturi was hit at this time. Although he had not yet shown his ugly face, Lily was close to him and could feel his tense body and clenched palms. Beads of sweat began to appear on his body, which proved that no matter how normal he looks on the outside, he must be feeling very uncomfortable in his body right now, and he is just trying to endure it. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come, /U003C. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 987. Brian, are you going to abandon the goddess of light, abandon the temple, and throw yourself into the arms of a slave just because of a female slave? Lily suppressed the depression in her heart. At this moment, since Brian didn't want to pretend any more going down, Lily naturally no longer has to pretend to be confused. The current situation is not good for her. Seeing that Arturi seems a little unreliable, although this person is said to have no contact with women, he is now under the influence of some secret medicine. Under the circumstances, even if he didn't smell much, his blood would boil. Arturi didn't make any move to cover his nose at all. He was even open and honest now. You can imagine how bad his situation would be. If the saint in front of him is really Anna, in such a situation, Anna's original good figure and appearance will be more attractive to Arturi. The backer he thought he invited was easily plotted by Anna. Brian was pressing hard again, and Lily shouted helplessly, which really frightened Brian. He subconsciously retracted his hand and looked at the girl on the throne with some panic, who was currently trying to untie the ribbon on her back. She was twisting her body, her long hair and the veil hung under the throne. When she heard Lily's words and felt Brian's gaze, her hand untying the ribbon paused. After a long while, she suddenly laughed. You actually discovered it? How did you do it? I'm really curious about you. When she said this, she glanced at Brian, her eyes full of coldness and indifference. This look was so irritating that Brian clenched his fists. At this point, Anna stopped pretending. She pulled off the cloth that covered her face. Under the cloth, the corners of her mouth were slightly raised, and her palm-sized face was full of charm. She put her hands between her tall chest and stared at Lily, looking up and down with a smile. How did you guess it was mine? Although Brian has become alienated from me these days, he is a devout believer of the goddess of light. I have been with him for many years. I understand his character. He has only done such things to you. I'm fascinated by you. When the knight died last night, you invited him to sleep with you. He must have recognized you, so he agreed, otherwise he would not have agreed based on his character, Lily was thinking at this moment. Already slashing Brian with a knife. But she described him as a loyal knight who was just deceived by the slave girl. When she talked about the years of love between the original owner and Brian, Brian was stunned for a moment, with a complicated look in his eyes. Although in the plot he betrayed the temple for Anna, Lily did not believe that he had lived in the temple for more than 10 years. She really didn't have any feelings for the temple at all. She could only gamble at the moment. I bet Brian would still be willing to help her if he wasn't so drunk with sex. She really has confidence in you. Such a beautiful relationship really makes me envious. So Brian, what are you waiting for? She belongs to you, Anna smiled softly, with a pair of cat-like eyes. His eyes slipped from Brian back to Arturi. The smile on the corner of her mouth was full of charm, and her eyes were captivating. But her eyes were always cold, and this contrasting feeling doubled her attraction. As for you. She paused after saying this, the next thing should belong to me. Originally I didn't want to use this method to you, but Arturi, you really surprised me with your indifference, as if everything I did couldn't attract your attention. It's a pity that I have to get you, and I persisted like this. You shouldn't be able to hold on for a long time, right? I saw that somewhere in you, you have begun to change. After Anna finished speaking, she laughed, and while smiling, she put her hand in. He sucked it between his lips, and let out a soft moan that penetrated his bones. Her eyes narrowed, and her body was as soft as a snake and twisted on the throne. Come here, what are you waiting for? My Lord Duke, don't you want to do it now? She said, as she stretched out her hand to hook the belt around her waist. She pulled it gently, and the originally fitting dress suddenly fell apart like petals. Her breasts, which had been squeezed so tight that they were about to burst out, bounced due to the loosening of the dress. When it came out, the beautiful curvature and white luster made Brian's eyes go straight. But Anna quickly opened her eyes, glanced at him coldly, and started to rub her breasts with a half-smile. "Brian, what are you still doing there? Do you want to look at me here?" As she said this, she licked her lips and started to hook up with Achuri. Achuri's originally fair cheeks had already been affected by the firelight. His forehead was dripping with cold sweat, his light golden hair stuck to his cheeks, his eyes were dark blue due to the baptism of desire. He held the lily tighter, and listened. When Anna said this, he suddenly said, "So, what should we do next?" His voice seemed a little tight because of his forbearance. Instead of his usual calmness and indifference, it revealed a bit of lust. Anna naturally heard it, and she suddenly laughed. "Lean forward and backward. What should I do next? What should I do? Do you still want me to teach you?" She reached out and took off the clothes that were in the way, revealing her beautiful figure. She spread her legs and held her hands, putting it between her thighs. "Come here, beg me." There was sarcasm in her eyes, and the scenery between her legs was unreservedly presented to several people. She didn't seem to mind that Lily saw this side of her. This scene proved that Anna would never allow herself to leave this place alive. Lily's heart sank. At this moment, Arturi fell into the trap, and he held on tightly. She couldn't leave. Brian on the other end disappointed her. Anna's actions made him hold her belly uncomfortably. A pair of eyes full of malice fell on her. She didn't dare to leave Arturi at the moment. At her side, she could only reach out her hand to hold him firmly. She felt that he was holding her tighter. Lily breathed a sigh of relief and forced herself to calm down quickly. She reached out and shook Arturi's hand, signaling him to hurry up. "Leave this place. It's freezing and snowy outside, even if you take some medicine." As long as he rolled in the snow, all the anger was gone, but she pulled a few times, but Achuri didn't move. After Anna finished shouting and asked Achuri to beg her, she couldn't bear it. She inserted a slender finger into her body. This scene was simply crazy, but Achuri stood still and moved. She didn't move either, even though Anna had her face covered just now. But after inhaling some thick smoke, she also started to become more interested. Achuri didn't move. She cursed twice and sat up from the throne. The beautiful scenery on her chest followed her movements as she stood up. "Keep wandering." She walked towards Achuri and licked her lips. "Don't you understand yet? Do you need me to teach you?" She bit her lips and reached out to touch Achuri's lower abdomen. A trace of disgust flashed in Achuri's eyes, and his eyelids drooped. "I understand. It's just the low aura on your body that still makes me feel sick." He took a step back, with a look of struggle on his face. "Come." He didn't look at Anna's hand that was slightly twisted because of his words, and didn't wait for her hand to touch her body. He looked around, but didn't find anything that he could take advantage of. He could only sigh with regret, suddenly clenched his hand into a fist, and punched Anna in the face. With a bang sound, Anna thought that he was in the moment of lust, and she never thought that he would suddenly take action. "I didn't even think about how he still had the strength to strike, but he hit me hard this time." His punch was fast and hard. After one punch, Anna's eyes showed disbelief. She felt as if the skull in her head was about to break. A large amount of blood came out from the corners of her nostrils and mouth. Anna's eyes widened. That beautiful flower-like color, the lips lost their original color and became a little pale. Her body swayed twice, and Achuri waved his hand. "Please. You're thinking too much." When he said this, his expression was cold, even though at this moment he could bear it so much that the veins on his forehead were jumping. As soon as his words fell, Anna's body popped, falling to the ground with a sound. She was beaten until she fainted on the spot. The exposed and slightly heaving chest proved that she had not completely breathed her last, but it was obvious that Anna was already in death at this moment. This sudden change shocked Brian. He had been sad because of Anna's move to seduce Achuri, but the next moment he saw his sweetheart was knocked unconscious by Achuri's punch without mercy. After that, he was stunned for a while, and suddenly he heard a painful wail in his mouth. A lot of fighting spirit burst out from his body, and he rushed towards Ichiri like he was going crazy. The expression on his face seemed to be about to eat someone. But Ichiri didn't seem to see his ferocious expression. When Brian rushed over, he just stretched out his hand to pull Lily behind him, raised one leg, and kicked Brian on the chest. Obviously the force of this kick didn't seem to be heavy, and Brian didn't even move his feet for an inch, but his hard knight armor quickly cracked with spider-like patterns, and he lowered his head in disbelief. This simple action seemed to kill him. A bright red drop of blood dripped out from the corner of his mouth, and dripped to the ground as if it had been stretched into a thread. Ichiri kicked Anna, who was already on the ground and was about to die. With a kick of his toes, Anna's soft body was kicked up and flew into the air. It fell into Brian's arms with a bang. He subconsciously reached out to catch it. But because of this action of picking up someone, his body became unsteady, and he began to retreat. He even stepped on the steps behind him while retreating. He missed his footing, rolled down while holding Anna, and hit his head on the step. Passed out together. From Anna being knocked unconscious suddenly to Brian being killed as the Golden Knight, all this happened in a very short period of time. Before Lily could react, Ichiri had already pulled her to the throne. With a step of his foot, he tore off the thick blanket on the throne. He roughly pulled off the black velvet jacket on his body and threw it up. Lily was still glad that she didn't have it this time. Mistaking the wrong person, Ichiri followed her, and it worked. This cold and scary man, under the influence of some secret medicine, was not only able to remain calm when faced with the temptation of a woman, he could also easily knock Anna unconscious. This kind of skill and self-control is not something that ordinary men can do. Arrived. She was a little excited. She had never encountered such a person even in the mission. She really admired such a strong willpower. "Sir, your skills are beyond my imagination." She had never seen Ichiri take action before, and she was a little worried at first. "I didn't expect that she was filtering too much." Ichiri dragged her for 2 steps. Because her body was weak, her feet hooked on the blanket on the ground, and she even staggered and almost fell. Lily subconsciously held his hand more steadily, and when she was about to stand up, Ichiri's hands hooked her waist and he picked her up easily, spinning her around. Before she could finish her words, she was already thrown onto the throne. The hard throne was extremely cold. Even if it was covered with his coat, Lily still let out a painful groan when she fell on it. She was knocked dizzy. She subconsciously propped up her body and tried to sit up, but a dark shadow quickly rushed towards her. Ichiri's fingers pinched her chin, forcing her to raise her head. His kiss was like a strong wind and waves. Quickly she drowned. The tip of his tongue brushed between her lips and teeth. She let out a quick, angry sound. She reached out to push Ichiri, but her wrist was quickly caught. Her legs were spread apart, and Ichiri knelt between her legs. He even easily turned Lily over like a turtle, and tied the rope with clothes on her back. To tear it off, even if Lily desperately reached out to grab her clothes, she was not as strong as him. At first Ichiri tried to keep her dress intact, but soon he became impatient. With one force, he tore off the whole skirt from the back. A large area of snow-white back skin was exposed to the air. Although there was a fire nearby, Lily's body still felt a small chill. He stretched out his hand and pushed his sleeves forward with just a slight push. Lily hugged her chest tightly, her heart beating very fast. My lord, what are you going to do?" She tried to calm down Ichiri. She could feel that Ichiri's hand was very hot. Lily guessed that he must have been drugged just now. The reason why he couldn't tell from the outside was just because Ichiri was good at forbearing. It was just that this man could endure it when he first faced Anna. In that state, she thought he had amazing willpower, but she didn't expect that when she turned around, he beat Anna half to death and then stretched his hands to herself. If she had known this earlier, she might as well hope that Arturi and Anna could do something to calm down the anger. It's cold outside, just go out and lie in the snow and ice, it will solve the problem, Lily shouted loudly. Arturi's hands moved around her body, and when he heard her words, he seemed to have heard something funny, and he laughed. Get up. Madam, why should I solve it like that? You are right in front of me, you are in my arms, I have learned how to do it now, do you also ask me to beg you? He smiled, but his hands were light and heavy. Moving over her body, the girl's skin underneath her was soft and elastic, feeling like fine fruit pulp, fresh and full, exuding bursts of sweet color. In fact, he couldn't help it since last night, but he didn't know what to do. He didn't act rashly because he was afraid that if he was not very good at something and something went wrong, he would not only fail to complete his task. What he wanted to do was to arouse Lily's vigilance. That would not be good. He endured it until today and saw Anna's performance. Although her actions make me feel a little uncomfortable, it seems that I have understood something. If you ask me to beg you, I will. His voice gradually became heavier, and Lily did not dare to look back. His face just curled up desperately and buried his head between his arms. Please, he said these two words softly but firmly. When Anna wanted to listen to him just now, he had ridiculed her so disdainfully. Now Lily no longer needs to listen to these two words. But he said these two words easily. Arturi's impression on Lily was that he was so proud, but at this moment, he seemed to have thrown aside his pride and self-esteem. After saying the words please, he turned Lily over firmly and gently. Come over. Lily had never felt the disadvantages of losing force value so directly before. She didn't want to give in, but it didn't seem to be of any use. It almost took no effort for Arturi to pull her over, and he pulled her away easily. Hands to make her face herself. I beg you, sir. She closed her eyes tightly, not even wanting to look at Arturi's face. Her resisting attitude made Arturi feel a dull feeling in his heart. He didn't understand why. Lily, why don't you want him to touch her? He will marry her, give her the status of the Arturi family, and give her anything she wants. She should belong to him, and his heart has always been so determined. She shouldn't be so resistant. It was as if he had seen this feeling on her face a long time ago. But she wasn't like this at that time, but no matter how he thought about the vague shadow in his mind, he couldn't remember it. He wanted her and longed for her, but when he heard her tremblingly say beg for yourself, he couldn't remember it. The softest corner seemed to have been touched by someone, and he subconsciously let go of his hand when he saw Lily trying to get up. He forced her back to the seat again, and when he saw her huddled up with her back leaning against him, a fire in her body grew stronger, and he couldn't help but touch her again. When Anna lit the fire, he actually felt something strange. But he didn't stop, because he wanted to know how certain things were done, so he let Anna do what she did. He knew that Lily was right. If he left this place now, he could easily calm down the effects of these drugs without even rolling in the snow. In fact, these things have no effect on him at all. What really affected him was not those inexplicable drugs, but her huddled on the throne at this moment. It was as if she had accidentally touched her face for the first time. She was like a key, opening a locked door in his heart, releasing some secrets that even he himself didn't know. He often had strange dreams recently. He would dream about Lily. It belongs to him, he just wants to hold his own person, and it is only natural. He didn't understand why Lily refused. He was not under the influence of drugs, the physical changes and desires came from her. At this moment, he didn't even want to resist, he just wanted to obey some of his body's desires. Arturi pursed his lips, and a dark light flashed in his eyes. He sat on the throne, put his arms around Lily's waist, and began to move his lips on her beautiful exposed back. Don't be afraid, Zaya. When the name of the original owner is recalled in this world, its pronunciation is somewhat similar to the word lily. However, this word with the same pronunciation was originally a group of words, which should represent holiness and purity. Once separated, it can no longer be used. It's called a word. The name Ziahi is not a strange tone that can be called by people from the lowland continent. This should not be called by people from the lowland continent. And from this tone, Lily, I heard something that seemed familiar. She tried to recall, and the words of these two words of comfort were so gentle that they could make water drop. It seemed that Li Yangzi had told her several times not to be afraid. She was stunned for a moment, and Art-Uri saw the moment when she was dazed, and his legs flew quickly. He kneeled between her legs, forcing her to spread them. Lily tried to see Achuri's face clearly, her heart was beating fast, and she tried her best to see something from Achuri's eyes, but Achuri didn't give her the time to stay in a daze. The fire burning nearby has gradually extinguished, and the unpleasant smell in the air has also dissipated. However, the burning feeling in the palace has not disappeared. Lily is trapped on the throne, and her body seems to have been dismantled and reassembled. The pain and struggle were of no use, he was firm and domineering and did not allow her to refuse, nor did he give her a chance to refuse. Her head hurt, but her body hurt even more. She wanted to think, but the pain and Art-Uri's ubiquitous smell stained every part of her body with his movements, including the softest parts. She was being he bullies. She gradually became infected with his scent. Every time she took a breath of fresh air, she could smell the light lemon-like scent in the air. Lying on the king's chair, even with a layer of clothes on her back, she was still cold. The pain and fullness made her want to go crazy. She wanted to close her legs and hide, but found that she had nowhere to hide. He could easily make her feel his presence without speaking, and it was so clear. Lily hates this mission, she hates Anna, she wants Anna to die. Even if she is a mission official. Okay girls, there are only 2 updates today, and they are combined into one. Because I don't want to whet everyone's appetite, there are no updates today. But soon, there will be an extra episode tonight. I think everyone has guessed what the extra episode is about. The reason why I post it in the main text instead of what the author has to say is because if it is free, Tencent book friends will not be able to see it. Now everyone has a fan value of 5,000 to join the group, and a fan value of 8,000 or more to claim the title. Tencent's book friends report their nicknames and fan values to contact the management to join the group. The same is true for readers of Dian Yang. If you don't want to receive it, just ignore it. You have no interest in the main drama. Influence. Group number, 239461614, the fan value is 5k to join the group, and the fan value is 8k to win the title. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come. P.S. I'm a bit verbose in the text, but if it's less than 300 words, there's no charge. I wish you all a happy reading, bye, and see you tomorrow. One final word, vote vote, vote vote, vote vote. I have said important things 3*2 times, not why, because I am too verbose /U003C. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 988. A scent of Japanese love gradually spread in the air as Achuri pulled away. Lily was lying in the king's chair, her chest could not help rising and falling, and her legs were trembling so much that she could not move. Achuri sat up, breathed a long sigh of relief, and hugged her, including her coat, into his arms. His half-curled hair stuck to his forehead, and his eyes were as clean and clear as the sky after the rain. His body was naked, but he seemed not to feel the cold air. His beautiful muscles seemed to contain energy, and Lily could feel that the desire aroused in his body had not completely subsided, it was just touching her body. "Why are you injured?" he frowned, with a confused look in his eyes. He had smelled blood before, but he couldn't stop being impulsive. Now he looked at her with a cold look. Art-Uri hugged the person tightly. Why are you unhappy? You are mine. He kissed Lily's forehead. The two of them had been so intimate before, so when they had such an intimate gesture now, it would appear completely different from the previous touch. Lily ignored him. Her heart was in a mess at this moment. The pain and fatigue in her body, coupled with Arturai's unintentional call to her name before, made her a little uneasy. It was just that after experiencing such a thing, she didn't want to nor had the strength to think about those many things. She closed her eyes, and Arturai leaned her against his chest, looking at her pale face, and her delicate face revealed there was a hint of perseverance, and the more he looked at her, the more he liked her in his heart. He couldn't help but kiss her again, picked up the clothes and put them on before holding her sideways in his arms. The two went down the stairs. Arturai's eyes soon became sharp. Brian and Anna, who had been kicked down by him to the steps, were nowhere to be seen. He only paused for a moment, but Lily in his arms was very nervous. She was keenly aware of his slight change, even though she was extremely tired at the moment, but for some reason, after the two of them seemed to have a close relationship, the invisible connection between them seemed to be much deeper. It was just a subtle movement from him at the moment, but Lily felt something was wrong. She opened her eyes and wanted to turn her head to look, but her body was too weak to raise her strength. She stretched out her hand and hung it around Ichiri's neck, but she didn't know if that arm had been suppressed by him before. Now it was trembling so much that she couldn't hold it up at all. Ichiri looked at her like this. Somewhat helplessly, he adjusted the position of holding her. It's gone. He lost control just now and didn't notice the change here. In addition, he received a punch. Even though he didn't strike out in anger, he didn't even use his punch because he didn't want to touch Anna too much. What strength! But logically speaking, Anna should not survive. He regarded Anna and Brian as dead people in his heart. After the two of them passed out, he didn't take any precautions. At that time, his mind was completely immersed in Lily, and he didn't expect that these two people could escape. Run away if he didn't provoke him. He didn't care about the fate of these two people, dead or alive. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, Ichiri was about to leave with Lily in his arms, but Lily heard Anna ran away. But she gritted her teeth with hatred and held onto Ichiri tightly. Seriously. We can't let her get away. I want her to die. Anna had hurt her so badly, but now she wanted to run away. This time it was too easy. Now Lily was almost certain of her suspicions. Anna must be the person responsible for this mission. Although for some unknown reason, she wanted to seduce Ichiri. Obviously Ichiri was her target, but she did it. But she shouldn't have planned the plot, but in the end she was the one who took the blame. Lily thought about this breath and couldn't swallow it. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She rarely suffered such losses in tasks. If Anna were in front of her at this time, she would chop this dead woman's heart into pieces alive. The hatred and murderous intent in her words made Ichiri silent for a moment. He just curled his lips slightly, and soon returned to his cold and serious expression. He could naturally see why Lily hated Anna. Yes, but he took advantage. It was best for Lily to vent her anger on others. He didn't like Lily ignoring him. If killing Anna could make her feel better, then of course he would kill her. Ichiri nodded. Lily still felt aggrieved after thinking about it. She closed her eyes and asked him in anger. Now you can tell me whether the previous story is true or false. She became angry when she thought of this. If it weren't for being cheated by the mission this time, she would have followed the previous instructions without knowing anything. If you guessed wrong about your habits, how could you end up like this? Her tone was a bit unwilling. Ichiri hugged her tighter, lowered his head and rubbed her face with his nose. She still wanted to hide, but he didn't let her dodge at all, and pressed his lips against hers. Then nodded in a good mood. Don't you want me to tell you next time you fall asleep? Seeing that Lily ignored him, he chuckled twice, the daughter that the couple abandoned on the roadside was picked up by a slave from another noble family, and the other daughter was found to be born bright when she was 10 years old. The body was sent to the temple, and she became a candidate saint in the temple. Therefore, the couple was received by the emperor and promoted their titles, allowing them to pay off the debt they borrowed and get rid of their previous dependents. Living on debt, this couple is a Roman family. Anyway, the person was already his, and Arturi did not continue to sell guanza. The marriage could be discussed later. He fulfilled his promise. Once the relationship with Lily was confirmed, he did not treat her. No more hiding. Lily felt awkward, but when she heard him happily say his promise this time, she still breathed a sigh of relief and leaned weakly against his chest. She was indeed in trouble this time. The plot had misled her from the beginning. The plot she received, including Brian's betrayal, made her mistakenly believe that the original owner was hurt because of it. Who would have thought that Brian was not that important in fact? Would you like the scepter of light? Arturi lowered his voice and asked. Lily frowned and struggled for a while to get off the ground. Why don't we just take a look? This time the mission had played a trick on her. After thinking about it, she felt that she could still become the saint of the Temple of Light as she had originally decided, and there might be room for change in this mission. If her guess was correct, she was not the main person responsible for the mission this time, and Anna wanted to kill her, then her mission this time should be to escape Anna's assassination and survive. Lily suffered a loss from Anna, so naturally she wanted to take revenge. In order to solve her current predicament, she had no choice but to kill Anna instead. As for before killing Anna, Arturi seemed to be a ruthless character and not easy to get along with. What happened before was just an accident, but it couldn't happen again. She wanted to avoid Arturi's closeness. She could only become a saint and refuse his proposal. Arturi could clearly see what she was thinking, but he didn't point it out. He just lowered his eyelids and nodded slightly after a while. He held Lily and passed through the door of the main hall at the back. These doors all led to the same direction. Behind it is a large pavilion, but it has long been abandoned. Because it is within the frozen mountains, there are no weeds growing in the castle, but the hard ice blocks many passages. The entire castle seemed like a handicraft carved from ice and snow. In some places, the hard ice blocks were broken. Arturi entered one of the broken ice doors. I don't know if it was because of his luck, but he did so casually. Select. He actually chose the right path. From the outside, this door seems to be just an ordinary room, but after entering, I realize that there is something else going on here. Behind this is a road that seems to lead directly to the top of the frozen mountain range. I don't know who dug it out. The long one seems to have no edge. Several corpses are lying on the side of the road. There is not much blood on them. It is obvious that they did not die here, but were dragged after death. To here. Two of the corpses were naturally those of paladins. They were still staring, with frost crystals on their brows, as if they were dead. Their extremely surprised expressions at the last moment of their lives were fixed on them. They must have died after Brian. Hands on. But what surprised Lily was that there was only one corpse of a saint here. She died in a different way from the two knights. She died by having her neck broken, and her head was placed at an extremely weird angle. On the ground, Lily took one look and was a little surprised. There is still one person left. Is he still alive? As soon as Lily finished saying this, she felt that something was wrong. She pursed her lips, looked at each other with Arturi, and looked towards the high platform not far away. Oops, as soon as she finished speaking, Arturi hugged her and stepped onto the stairs. His steps were not fast, but each step was huge. He could walk 3 steps at a time, and he held his arms. He was alone, but he didn't seem to feel the weight at all. Soon the high altar could be seen in the distance. There was only an altar on top. At this moment, A half-naked figure was half-kneeling with his back to the two of them, had their heads lowered and their hands hanging on their waists. When Lily climbed up the steps, she realized that this was one of the two saints. Before, he looked at her from a distance and thought she was kneeling to worship something. Now that she was closer, Lily saw that she was kneeling on the altar, with her chin resting on the edge of the altar, because after she died, the edge of the altar, her skin has been frozen together, so the body supporting her has not slipped. The bright red blood at the corner of her mouth has been frozen, her lips are slightly open, and the inside is bloody and bloody. A tongue on the side is thrown to the ground. The saint's beautiful face is already a little distorted, which obviously shows how much pain she suffered during her life. Her lips, which were bright red and light pink when she was alive, are now stained red with blood. The blood on her chin flows into a groove on the altar. The groove is like a very small basin, which is now full. There should have been something enshrined on the altar, but it has disappeared now. You can only see the mark of being taken away from where the thing was originally placed. There is no one else in this dark temple. Apart from Anna and Brian, no one else could have been here. Did they come and take away the scepter of light? Lily didn't expect that she would rush over, but she still missed. She felt a little aggrieved. Anna must have accepted the plot, so she was able to find this place and take away the scepter of light. The death of the saint in front of her, as well as the small half of the pool of blood, she immediately guessed most of the truth of the matter. The scepter of light should indeed be enshrined in the altar of this dark temple, but to take away the scepter, some price must be paid, if she was not mistaken. It should be that the blood of the Saint of Light is needed to unlock this blockade. So this time, the Temple of Light rarely sent the Holy Lady of Light to accompany the knights to get this thing. The old man Andrew also said that this was the trial of the Holy Lady of Light, and that it was to avoid alerting the snake. It was all a lie. Perhaps these people had known for a long time that the scepter was sealed, so they sent several saints to come. If they wanted to obtain the scepter, a group of people would have to kill each other. The winner uses the blood of the loser to obtain the scepter of light. After returning, the other competitors die, and the living ones naturally become saints. Anna should have had the idea of killing two birds with one stone at the beginning. She might indeed be the task taker. She accepted the original Anna's wish and wanted to complete certain tasks for her. And for her, she killed Miss Roman, her sister who had the same mother as her but had a different fate. Anna never thought of allowing herself to live in the first place. She received the plot, so she lurked in the frozen mountains. She took the opportunity to kill a candidate saint, disguised herself as her, and killed her knight. Let Brian follow her. She stayed with Brian last night, and the two must have discussed it long ago. Brian killed the two pairs of light knights and saints, and then she got Art Uri and temporarily kept Lily alive. Her original intention was probably to use Lily as a blood source for sacrifice, so she kept Lily alive. Saved her life. But for some reason the plan changed and the two knights died, but things did not go as Anna imagined. She didn't seduce Achuri and get his body. She was even nearly beaten to death by Achuri, and her original intention of using Lily as a sacrifice was naturally not achieved. But fortunately, Brian didn't kill the two saints for some unknown reason. Maybe he betrayed the temple, but he was a little afraid of these two candidate saints who represented the avatars of the goddess of light and couldn't bear to do it. Maybe it was because of his years of his faith made him leave the lives of two saints in one thought. Anyway, no matter what the reason was, his actions gave Anna an opportunity to take advantage of it. She took advantage of the close relationship between Art Uri and Lily to bring the two corpses and the saint to this altar. And used this living sacrifice of the saint to obtain the things above. As for why she brought the two knights in, Lily thought of the intricate rows of doors before, with many broken in the middle. It should have been done by Brian after he killed the two knights. All of this, the reason is that Anna wants to cover up the public's eyes, so that even if Lily and the two come back to their senses after the passion and find that they are missing, they will be confused by those doors and will not immediately chase after the sexual array set up. Thinking of this, Lily suddenly came back to her senses. She glanced at Arturi with a half-smile. For some reason, after having an intimate relationship with him, her mind became much more flexible than before. "Sir, there are so many doors, why did you win this one alone? Anna may know where to go because of the plot, but what about Arturi? Why would he enter this place without hesitation?" Arturi listened to her question and hugged her tighter. "I have been here many years ago." He did not hide anything about Lily's question, and said the promise very openly. Lily did not expect him to answer like this. "Then is there a scepter of light here?" Originally he nodded again. Lily naturally heard the word originally in his words, but she only thought that he meant that there was indeed a scepter of light here, but it was taken away by Anna. She still had a lot of questions, but unfortunately it was obviously no longer a good time to ask questions, because Anna had gotten the scepter, and she would definitely run away. For this thing, she went through a lot of trouble to come to such a place. This scepter of light must be useful to her. She has suffered such a big loss, and the scepter must not fall into her hands. Thinking of this, Lily swallowed the question on her lips. She reached out and patted Arturi. Chase her, she couldn't let Anna escape. Her active approach made Arturi's mouth curl up, and he touched her cheek. "As you wish, but your loyal knight thinks that he can get a kiss in return." He became more and more cunning. Lily glared at him for taking advantage of the situation, and felt helpless. Arturi lowered his head, his soft hair brushing her face. His hair was clearly wet with sweat before, but now it seemed as if the wetness of his hair had no effect on him at all. He only wore thin shirt. But his body was very warm, he was smiling, and his eyes reflected Lily's pale face, as if he could not see anything else except her. Lily hurriedly kissed him on the cheek. He was still a little dissatisfied, but he knew he couldn't push any more. He hugged Lily and quickly went down the stairs and returned to the main hall of the Dark Temple. The door was already open, and a large amount of cold wind poured into the hall, blowing away the ambiguous atmosphere in the hall. Arturi hugged Lily and ran towards the door, but Anna unexpectedly did not. Without running away, her weak voice came. "I would like to use him as a sacrifice." Brian was a little in disbelief. And another extremely painful howl sounded. As if he had experienced some painful torture, he shouted hoarsely. Why? Arturi held Lily and saw from a distance in front of the statue of the dark goddess outside the door. Anna, who had been seriously injured before, was now sitting and lying in the snowdrift in the same posture as the dark goddess statue. Brian was sitting on his knees. In front of her. In her hand, she held a scepter that seemed to be made of an unknown white material. The scepter was in the shape of a letter Y. The top looked like a clothes pole that people used to hang clothes and hangers in modern times. She held it high in her hand. Brian was aging rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was like a water-filled balloon that was poked in an instant. It exploded and quickly deflated. When Lily came out, Arturi's footsteps were not deliberately concealed. The two people over there turned their heads and saw clearly Anna's originally very delicate face. She looked extremely terrifying at this moment. Her figure was still that graceful, but her face was too terrifying. Arturi's punch broke the bones of her head, and her face was covered with bruises. There were large and small bloodstains like spider silk, and her nose and brow bones were all sunken, including her teeth. Her face was like a ghost from the abyss. This appearance, coupled with her figure, gave people an extremely terrifying look. Feel. But she seemed to feel no pain. When she turned around, her eyes, which were already somewhat deformed and bloodshot, were filled with hatred. Didn't you say you were willing to die for me? Men always like to say beautiful love words to seduce women in bed. When Brian got her, he once said that he would become her loyal knight and be willing to die for her, but at that time he said these words at that time, He probably never thought at all that one day the sentence would become his own destiny. Like a fatal noose, it was tied around his neck, getting tighter and tighter, but in front of the beauty, he couldn't feel the suffocating pain. He never thought that one of his joking words would eventually be taken as a vow by Anna, and that the words he spoke while fascinated by her beauty would eventually become something that could kill him. Regret flashed in Brian's eyes. He betrayed the temple and the faith he had grown up with. He killed his compatriots in the temple. He committed an irreversible crime. Perhaps this was the punishment given to him by the goddess of light. Let him die at the hands of his beloved woman. With a knife on his head, he is willing to betray the temple for Anna. He is willing to do a lot for Anna, but it does not mean that he is willing to die for Anna in such an undignified way. For a night, there is no death in the darkness. During the struggle, he died at the hands of his lover, which was really a huge humiliation. As Brian's body was sucked out, a stream of pure white life energy poured into Anna's body from his body. Her originally terrifying face began to repair at the speed of light, and the uneven cheeks on her face soon began to the full luster was restored at an extremely fast speed, and those terrible blood stains and stains began to disappear quickly. The faster Brian's body became empty, the faster her appearance recovered. Soon, her appearance recovered. She looked like before, but her eyes held an indescribable coldness and condescending contempt as she stared at Achuri and Lily, who had just been driven out. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 989. Brian's body fell softly to the ground like an empty skin that had lost its support. Anna stood up naked and indifferently. After saying a few words, a huge energy flowed from her mouth. Her plump body was dazzling and stunningly beautiful in the snow. She sneered, "Those who bully me and insult me will one day pay 1,000 times the price." Without looking at the lifeless Brian on the ground, a white light visible to the naked eye flew out from the scepter she held in her hand, sweeping up a large amount of wind and snow and attacking Achuri and Lily. "Come on," Achuri motioned to Lily to put her arms around his neck. He hooked one hand around her waist and left his other hand free to draw a circle. Lily put her arms around his neck. This action prevented her from seeing Achuri's circular motion in the void, and she could only vaguely feel his arms moving. He drew a circle, and a transparent ball began to appear out of thin air. As if by magic, the ball became bigger and bigger. Anna's attack was suddenly covered by the circle drawn by Achuri's free hand. Inside the ball the world seems to have formed two different time and spaces from the outside. The blizzard is still rolling inside, but the ball cannot be broken no matter what. What's this? When Anna saw all this, her face suddenly changed, and she subconsciously exclaimed. She ignored that she was naked, and turned around to run away with a somewhat embarrassed expression, but Achuri narrowed his eyes, and there was no way she could escape. The ball spun twice on his fingertips and was suddenly thrown out by him. Anna's body was already flying. She didn't know when she had such a great ability. She flew in the air, her body galloping out at an extremely fast speed. She was about to turn into a small white dot and disappear from Achuri's sight. However, the ball moved even faster, and hit with a bang sound. She touched her back, and a muffled groan seemed to come out of her mouth. Her body swayed twice in mid-air, and a large mouthful of bright red blood rain was sprayed out by her and was quickly enveloped by the cold wind of the frozen mountains. Anna suffered this hit, but didn't stop. Instead, she took a strong breath and flew away quickly. "It's really interesting, I can actually run away." When Lily heard this, she subconsciously relaxed Achuri's arm and looked. "But I saw it in a snowstorm." Anna's body ran farther and farther like a shooting star. Her flying long hair could be seen floating in the air from a distance, and gradually, her figure became a small black dot. Disappeared quickly. What she just held in her hand was the scepter of light. Lily's face was as dark as water at this time. Anna had the ability before, but she definitely did not have such an ability to suddenly fly in the air. Lily thought that she had just held it. The scepter that looked like a crotch stick came to me, and I guessed that Anna relied on this thing, so she had power. This time her strength has increased. Because she is not a mission holder, her strength has been suppressed by the world. Not only her intelligence, mental strength, and other attributes seem to be suppressed, but even her force value seems to be suppressed. Relationship: I have been practicing physical training for more than 10 days, but I have not made much progress at all. Now that Anna has obtained the Scepter of Light as soon as she arrived, her strength has increased exponentially. She was able to launch an attack like rolling up a small hurricane just now, and she can also fly into the air at this moment. It is conceivable that either she was before because she got a certain force value in the mission, and she might have entered this mission earlier, so in a way, she had an advantage over him. This can be seen from the fact that she can cut the throat of a wolf with clean movements before. Anna can go through mission after mission and enter the difficult mission at this stage. She is definitely a ruthless character who is not inferior to herself. She has high attribute values, and she entered the mission early to increase her force value. Maybe like herself, she may have secret techniques such as star training. Now that she has obtained the Scepter of Light, Lily no longer dares to think about it. Anna is the sister of the original owner, and it is her duty to kill her. This time, the task is no longer what Lily wants. Her most important task is not to win back Brian's heart, nor to become a saint, but to save her life. If she can survive from Anna's hands, her mission will be successful, and Anna will fail. If she can't survive, and she dies in Anna's hands, Anna's mission will naturally be successful. This mission is like the Hunger Games. She and Anna have to kill each other. The one who can survive is the winner. Lily closed her eyes and felt a chill in her heart. Is this what Li Yangzi meant when he said that the task will become more difficult as it gets later? It was as if he was cultivating goo insects, obtaining a large number of souls for his use. These people who performed tasks for him became stronger and stronger, and finally met each other and killed each other. Lily's body tensed up. The situation was extremely unfavorable to her now. Because Li Yangzi was not in the starry sky, this mission had nothing to do with his arrangements. It was probably not his intention to put himself in such a situation. Now Anna is a ruthless character. She has been alive to this day, and her desire to survive is no less than her own. If two people who both want to live meet, they will probably fight to the death. It is indeed the Scepter of Light, but I didn't expect it to be so powerful. Achuri raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and Anna's leaving back was no longer visible in his eyes. Forget it, just run away. At this moment, he was still holding Lily and didn't want to chase her for the time being. Their eyes fell on Brian, who had already lost his vitality. Half of his body had been covered by a thin layer of snow, and his originally handsome face was only a piece of human skin. There was only one skin bag left, spread loosely on the ground, swaying when the wind blew. The scene was particularly terrifying. The expression on his face was no longer visible because he had lost the flesh and blood inside. He seemed to be lying on the statue of the goddess of darkness. In front of me, it's like a joke. For Anna, he betrayed his faith for many years and betrayed the goddess of light to whom he should have sworn to be loyal to the death. The person who betrayed in the end was betrayed one day. He was killed here by Anna as some kind of evil sacrifice, and died in front of the statue of the dark goddess for which he was supposed to fight to the end. Arturi withdrew his eyes from the blizzard and saw Lily staring at Brian's human skin on the ground. He lowered his head without any trace and asked softly, "Does it look good?" He asked carelessly, and Lily glanced at him. "What's so interesting about a dead person?" "I was just wondering what method Anna used to regain her strength and ease in such a short period of time, and she was able to recover from such a serious injury." Speaking of this, Lily began to feel cold in her heart again. Seeing Anna's previous appearance, Lily always felt that she could hardly live anymore, but she was able to survive a desperate situation. In the blink of an eye, those injuries were repaired like a broken wall and painted with new paint. Recovered all of a sudden, but Brian died the moment she recovered. She should have used Brian's life to repair herself. How could she do it? What kind of abilities and magic does Anna, the tasker, possess to be able to do so many things? Hearing her say such words, Arturi was so close to her that he could see the worry hidden in her eyes. The faint smile at the corner of his mouth did not fade away, and his eyes turned from Lily to the statue in the snow that was originally full of worry. On the statue of the dark goddess of temptation. The statue seemed to have lost its luster now, and its face was still the same as before, but it no longer had the breathtaking feeling before. He held Lily in his arms and walked towards the goddess statue step by step. The originally charming look in the statue's eyes had now turned into a rigid stone statue. He seemed not to have noticed Brian's human skin on the ground, and stepped on it with a frightening crunching sound. Arturi coaxed. "I can't tell whether her recovery is good or bad, just feel it." His voice was soft, and Lily seemed possessed. Sure enough, she listened to his words and reached out to touch her. It's strange to say that the statue of the dark goddess, which seemed to be standing in the cold wind, had not changed at all despite being beaten by the wind and snow for so many years. At this time, Lily stretched out her finger and poked the statue of the goddess. The throne she was originally sitting on was lightly poked with a finger hole. Lily was shocked. She didn't expect that this stone sculpture looked so hard, but could be so fragile. What's even more terrifying is that when the wind blows again with her poke, the entire statue seems to have already decayed. From the head to the hair of the dark goddess, it begins to turn into white powder and scatter in the blink of an eye. The last throne also turned into foam and disappeared in the snowstorm. When the wind blew again, there was only a flat area left here. Where could you see the shadow of the statue before? It's as if nothing ever existed. This. Lily looked at Arturi subconsciously, with horror in her eyes. This statue should not be so fragile anyway. The statue had been standing here for such a long time without breaking, but now it is broken at will. Anna specially sacrificed Brian in front of this goddess statue before, and restored her appearance here. She must have done something to the goddess statue. Let's go. Arturi couldn't help laughing when he saw her like this. Lily didn't ask him why, and he didn't tell him. He didn't seem too anxious about Anna getting the inheritance. He went back in the direction they came from, stepping step by step in the snow, holding someone in his arms. But it was not strenuous, and it seemed very relaxed when going down the mountain. He said he had been here before and found his way there. At this time, the sun was already heading west, but due to the geographical location of the frozen mountains, it would get dark slower than in other places. When the two returned to the camp where they rested yesterday, the place had long been buried by a snowstorm. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 990. Arturi found the place where several people got off the Earth Dragon yesterday. When they arrived in the frozen forest, they released the Earth Dragon and allowed them to move freely. These things have been trained by the army and will not leave too far. Arturi and when Lily and the two found it, the 4 Earth Dragons had been killed and frozen in huge ice blocks. They had obviously died long ago, and the remaining Earth Dragon had disappeared. It was obvious that Anna had come one step earlier than them. That Earth Dragon, she has been ridden away. Seeing such a scene, Lily's face suddenly became gloomy. She glanced at Arturi. What should we do now? Without the Earth Dragon, if the two of them had to rely on their legs, they would have to go out of the mountains to find a place with people, and then exchange for transportation. It would be unknown how long it would be before they returned to the imperial capital. She felt a little angry. This time the mission was full of problems. It didn't go well. She had been suppressed by Anna, and now even the Earth Dragon was overtaken by her. Lily gritted her teeth, but Arturi looked calm. "I will take you out." When Lily heard this, she wanted to cry without tears. She was not worried about not being able to go out. She would definitely be able to go out, but it was a matter of time. If it took 10 days and a half to go out, everything would be over when she returned to the imperial capital. Half a month later, after the Light Festival, once the choice of a saint is confirmed, she will never become a saint. Do she really have to accept her fate and return to his territory with Arturi and marry him? Lily's eyelids drooped, blocking the light in her eyes. She would definitely not agree to such a condition. She also wants to return to the temple and become the Saint of Light, using the intimidating power of the temple and the strength of Andrew and other archbishops to protect herself. This is what Andrew, the old fox, owes to herself. She can take advantage of this period of time to practice hard. No matter how strong Anna is, Lily still doesn't want to admit defeat until the last moment. Since her mission this time is to save her life, she can't just do it casually. The task was completed by Anna. Arturi had been looking down at her, and saw that her eyelids were drooping, blocking her thoughts. Although the expression on his face was as usual, his eyes seemed motionless under his thin eyelids. No matter how well she concealed it, Arturi could tell that she was not as calm as she showed. Although the two were once so close, Lily didn't seem to be sincere to him, so he lowered his head. His forehead gently touched her cold and smooth cheek, and she suddenly asked, "Can you go back early?" Why go back early? She was still begging for herself at the moment and didn't want to break her face, so she still had some scruples when speaking. She didn't speak frankly, and Arturi also pretended to be confused, so he asked a question. Lily hesitated for a long time. The Festival of Light is about to begin. After all, I am also a member of the Temple of Light. Even if I can't find the scepter this time, I still have to go back to deliver the mission. What's more, you have been summoned to the imperial capital by His Majesty the Emperor. Is it just to participate in the Festival of Light? It might not be good if you are late. He didn't look panicked at all. Lily wondered if there was some way for him to get back earlier, so she said a few words. Arturi glanced at her calmly. Do you need to report to the people from the Temple of Light? After you go back this time, you should come back to the fiefdom with me. I have already asked people to start preparing for the wedding, and I don't really want to invite people from the Temple of Light to attend. After saying that, he paused again and saw Lily couldn't help showing an anxious look for a moment, and suppressed the smile on the corner of his mouth. As for the Emperor inviting me to participate in the Festival of Light, I will participate if I have time. If I don't, if you go, what can you do? Although the Arturi family still belongs to the Noer Empire in name, in fact, the military regime has long been independent and is a separate small country. The Emperor of Noer has no control over it. To him. What's more, the most important thing is that this time the Light Festival is of great importance, because the Pope and the Saint must be selected. The reason why the Emperor discussed with several archbishops of the Light Temple to hold it in advance is because they were afraid that the people from the Dark Temple would stop the Light Temple. Elect a Pope. After all, with a leader, the Temple of Light is equivalent to having a backbone and will rise again. The Dark Temple does not want to see such a scene. They have fought to the death with the Light Temple for many years, and they will definitely come to cause trouble. Therefore, in order to prevent the people from the Dark Temple from causing damage, after discussion, it was decided that the Light Festival will be held 6 months in advance. And the news has been blocked until the past few days, and the news has not been completely leaked. The purpose is to catch the people of the Dark Temple off guard. Even if they want to destroy it, they will not be prepared. And in order to strengthen the defense, the temple did not know what kind of benefits it used to impress the emperor, and the emperor borrowed a guard force from Achuri. On the surface, Arthurai suddenly entered the imperial capital. In fact, this time he brought people from the imperial capital. As long as his soldiers and guards are still in the imperial capital, the emperor may not care whether others are present, and maybe he will. She was extremely happy that he was not in the imperial capital. This guard force is strong, but once Arthurai leaves, they will be leaderless, and the emperor will naturally be on guard against him. Arthurai told Lily about these reasons, and Lily's heart suddenly went cold. A feeling of suffering came from the bottom of her heart. She rarely encountered such a situation where she suffered losses one after another during the long mission. Bad situations kept happening, and bad news came one after another. Achuri's words seemed to have cut off her retreat, and Lily couldn't help but feel a little angry. If that's the case, then why did you agree to come out with me? She clearly knew that she came out for the Scepter of Light. She got the Scepter of Light because she wanted to become a Saint of Light, and she promised to marry Atu after that. Here, it's just a matter of interests, not sincere. But now she went out and didn't get the Scepter of Light. Now that she can't go back, the position of the saint has been ruined. She was also taken advantage of by Achuri. Now that the wedding is about to be held, she seems to be being pushed out of the fight. An inexplicable anxiety surged into Lily's heart, making the fire in her heart grow stronger and stronger. She finally couldn't keep her calm face when she spoke, but Arthurai didn't seem to care about her attitude towards her anger. When he heard this, he just raised his eyebrows. "This choice is yours, my dear, I have never forced you." He was already furious, but he was still there. The most important thing was that when Lily thought about it carefully, she became a little depressed again. It is true that he never forced himself from the beginning to the end. He only revealed a lot of inside information to himself and provided himself with some plausible clues. Every word he said was true, but it was intermittently. If these words were he connected it and said, then Lily might have guessed the truth, but just because he said some things consciously and did not tell everything, so what he said, after Lily thought it was verified, plus her own original for some reason, we entered the wrong dead end. Coupled with some clues he provided, he tempted himself to see Anna and Brian having sex. From then on, Lily determined that Anna was the mission she wanted to complete. Now it seems that this conclusion is generally correct. But when I think about it seriously, I am totally wrong again. Achuri is as cunning as a fox. He tells the truth and does nothing. He is like a master at digging a hole, trapping himself into it step by step. It was her own decision to want to participate in the Saintess trial. She wanted to ask for his help, which was also her request. He made the request. Lily thought she was smart and thought she would find a way to return to the starry sky after completing the task and becoming a saint, thinking she could avoid it. He therefore agreed. But now that I think about it carefully, the matter has nothing to do with him at all. She thought she was smart but was misled by her cleverness. There is always a mountain as high as a mountain. This time she fell into trouble. But Lily understood this, but she was angry in her heart. You didn't force me, but you concealed some important clues. You misled me so that I didn't get the Scepter of Light this time. Our previous transactions should not be counted. As if he had expected that she would regret and refuse to admit it, Achuri finally laughed. He stared at Lily with an indulgent look, and his eyes seemed to be filled with smiles. Indeed, there are some things I didn't say, he nodded and admitted. Just as Lily was about to speak, he continued, but if I don't say it, what does it matter? If you didn't want to marry me at that time, there is no relationship between us. Why should I tell so much news to a strange lady? If you want to marry me, then whether you say something or not, the result will be the same as now. You will always marry me, so what do you think these concealments can do to hinder us? His words indeed sounded reasonable, which made Lily speechless. She stared at Achuri. After a long time, he still laughed out loud and wrapped his robe tightly around her, regardless of her dodge. Kissed her heavily on the lips. The conversation between the two people in the frozen mountains came to an end for the time being. Without the earth dragon, Achuri began to hold Lily in his arms and tried to walk out with his strong willpower. Each step he took was not big, but he walked very steadily. Lily didn't want to pay attention to him at first, and the next two people walked like this after stopping and stopping, seeing that it was impossible to return to the imperial capital in 10 days and a half. Lily became really anxious. She couldn't help but beg Achuri, and despite his semi-seduction, she was not really taken down by him again. After swallowing it into her stomach, but also eating a lot of tofu, Achuri finally led her to walk faster. It took the two of them 15 days to get out of the frozen mountains. In the past few days, Lily had to rely on his back most of the time because of her weak physical constitution. He was the one looking for food. Lily didn't suffer much yet. But after 10 days, Lily still felt exhausted, but he was still energetic. The two of them left the mountains. Under Lily's urging, he found a local army and borrowed an earth dragon through some unknown method. After people got on the earth dragon, they finally set off towards the imperial capital. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 991. It's too late now. Although I knew that Achuri had already sped up a bit, he was only a human being after all. No matter how strong his physique was, but he was the only one who wanted to leave this hellish place, and he had to take him with him. It was good to be able to get out of this mountain range in more than 10 days, but Lily was still feeling a little depressed. 15 days have passed, and the candidate for the saint in the imperial capital has probably been decided, but she is still late to go back. Lily sighed when she thought of this. Achuri put his hands around her waist, trapping her whole body on his chest. When the earth dragon flapped its wings and flew up, the frozen mountains were gradually left behind. Achuri heard her words, paused for a long time. That's not necessarily the case. He said the words not loudly, as if they were in his mouth. Lily was hiding in his robe, except because her back was close to him and she felt his chest vibrating slightly when he spoke. Outside, she vaguely heard his voice, but didn't hear what he said clearly. She asked again. Achuri didn't know whether he didn't hear it, or whether he heard it but didn't want to answer. Lily naturally didn't speak either. The earth dragon did not fly towards the imperial capital city, but flew towards the territory of the Achuri family outside the city. He had already felt the breath above his head early in the morning. After confirming that it was Achuri, the security in the territory dispersed. The earth dragon was allowed to fall into the territory of the Achuri family. Leon stayed below and couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief when he saw Achuri returning safely. He glanced at Achuri, as if he had something to say to him. Take a shower first and rest for a while. Let's go to the city. Achuri squeezed Lily's hand, and Lily nodded reluctantly. The two of them went out for half a month before returning. It was obvious that the atmosphere between the two parties was different from before. Leon could see it, but he didn't point it out. He asked someone to prepare hot water for Lily. Lily had not really taken a hot bath in the more than 10 days she had been out this time. When she was in the frozen mountains, the sky was filled with snowflakes and strong winds. Now she was back and lying in hot water. Only then did she feel her whole body relax. I thought carefully about what had happened in the past few days in my mind. When she came out of the bathroom, Achuri had already washed himself and changed into a soft satin nightgown. The fatigue of the past 10 days seemed not to have left any traces on his body and face. He still looked upright and energetic. There was a dining table before him. Several exquisitely cooked foods were placed on it. I ate dry food for more than 10 days in a row. There were almost no living creatures in the frozen mountains. Lily smelled the fragrance in the air and couldn't help but swallowed. She sat down and Arturi watched her eat. He must have eaten while she was taking a bath. We came back late. The Festival of Light should have been held yesterday. It was already evening now, and the city gate had already been closed. After a night's rest to recuperate, we could only prepare to enter the city tomorrow. This delayed us for 2 days. 4 days and days. I don't know who the saint is. The original candidates for the saints, except for myself, have all died in the frozen mountains this time. Since I have not returned yet, I am afraid that the people in the temple can only choose from other candidates for the saints. Made a choice. Achuri heard her words and said nothing. Lily lay next to him that night. He originally thought that he would not be able to sleep, but he didn't know if it was because when he was in the frozen mountains, this body had become accustomed to the belt on his chest. The only warmth that came to her was that Arturi held her on his chest, and she still fell asleep, but her sleep was not solid, and she kept dreaming. Sometimes she dreamed of the scene before Brian's death, and sometimes she dreamed of that. The scene of the saint who had her tongue torn off and used blood to untie the scepter of light was lying on the altar. She also dreamed of Anna holding the scepter and saying coldly to her, "Those who bully me and insult me will one day pay 1,000 times the price." She held the scepter, as if the ugly and ridiculous prongs at the top were emitting bursts of purple light, illuminating her. His face looked a little coquettish. She groaned that night and didn't sleep well. When she woke up in the morning, her face was a little pale. Leon personally sent a dress. The two of them changed their clothes and then took the prepared carriage into the city. The city was quiet, and there were obviously many more soldiers patrolling the streets than usual. The security was very tight, and there was a feeling that a storm was coming. The people in the temple who could be seen everywhere in the past have all disappeared now. When they came to the Temple of Light, the temple still had the same white and unstained appearance as before, but there were not as many people as usual. In and out. When the carriage entered the temple, he saw Lily being pulled out of the carriage by Arturi. The trainee priest guarding the door had a look of shock on his face. Before he could return to the main hall, several archbishops came in a hurry. When they saw Lily, the eyes of these archbishops clearly showed the expression of surviving the disaster. Andrew lowered his head for a moment, holding the holy book of light in his hand, and shouted loudly, "Thank you to the goddess of light for your blessing." Seeing this situation, Lily obviously felt that something was not right. She frowned, glanced at Achuri subconsciously, and pulled him tighter. Andrew and the other archbishops looked at each other, and there was something in their eyes. A priest slowly retreated without leaving a trace. Lily saw this and became wary. Something was wrong with this situation. She had been tricked by people in the temple, and now she was even more wary. Although Arturi made her feel wary, she still believed in him for some reason. The people in the temple gave her the feeling of being even more unreliable. She got closer to Achuri, and Achuri seemed to feel the emotions in her heart and put his arms around her shoulders. "Dear, thank God, you are finally back. It has been a hard journey." Archbishop Andrew's eyes showed excitement and ecstasy, and he thanked the goddess of light for her blessing. This is the goddess's metaphor. "My child, you are the light, the girl chosen by the goddess." Lily immediately understood the meaning of his words. If Lily thought correctly, Andrew meant that she might become a saint. The other archbishops remained silent, apparently acquiescing to Andrew's words. "I originally thought that I would definitely not be able to become a saint this time." She missed the light festival this time, but she didn't expect that after 2 days of delay, Archbishop Andrew came back and secretly told himself that she was chosen by the goddess of light. When Lily heard the news, not only was she not surprised at all, but she actually had goosebumps all over her body. If anything goes wrong, she becomes a monster, not to mention that what happened this time was too weird. Although she wanted to be a saint, she didn't want to be a pawn in the hands of Andrew and others, so Andrew's words stopped. She did not show the ecstatic expression that Andrew and others imagined. But I felt even more wary. The Grand Duke has never visited the temple before. There are many beautiful things worth admiring here. Why don't you have someone lead you around here? Andrew suddenly turned his head. Looking at Itchery, he laughed. He obviously had something to say to Lily alone. Therefore, we are going to send Itchery away first. Thinking that she had been deceived by Andrew, a seemingly kind but actually full of scheming archbishop, Lily had just thought that he was interested in Art-Uri. Now wary of Andrew, Lily's eyes narrowed. Art-Uri sat without moving, and held her whole body in his arms, and she didn't struggle. Sir, you can learn more about the Temple of Light. After Andrew finished speaking, seeing that neither of the two people expressed anything, he suddenly felt a little embarrassed, but it couldn't be seen on his face at all. Lily didn't want to talk nonsense to him, so she interrupted directly. He said, "Why is the Archbishop now saying that I am the girl chosen by the Goddess of Light? Haven't the other girls been chosen by the Goddess?" Or, something else happened. As soon as Lily said these words, several archbishops in the temple had expressions on their faces. There was a look of reluctance. This group of people still wanted to try their best to hide it, but Itchery now spoke. The day before yesterday, the Light Festival was not held as scheduled. It was just because the people did not know that the Light Festival had been brought forward early in the morning, so it did not cause panic among believers at this time. They just saw that it was not too early before the actual time of the Light Festival. Many believers from various places, those who are far away, have begun to rush to the imperial capital all the way. But the people didn't know that the Light Festival was ahead of schedule, but there were many people inside the temple. By now, the archbishops were probably panicking. Art-Uri's words made a group of archbishops look shameless. Just as they were about to speak, Art-Uri had already narrowed his eyes. "I think, except for those people in the frozen mountains who died, the other saints should also have had accidents one after another, which is why no one rushed back before the Light Festival. Messiah, now, I am afraid that in the Temple of Light, you are the only candidate for the saint left alive." This news was like a pebble falling into the lake, causing large ripples. When several archbishops in the temple heard this, their eyes showed shock, fear, and some panic, mixed with a secret being revealed. The feeling after breaking. Lily felt a chill in her heart. She thought of Anna. She instinctively felt that this matter should be related to her. She subconsciously looked up at Itchery, but saw that he nodded slowly as if he understood what she was thinking. His actions undoubtedly confirmed Lily's guess, causing her to frown. Anna took the scepter of light that day and escaped from the frozen mountains, and killed several earth dragons to prevent them from leaving. She herself, if she left alone, maybe she would go after other saints. She is a mission holder. She has received missions and should know the whereabouts of other saints. She seems to have gained some magical power. It should be effortless for her to kill several saint knights. And Anna had time. When she arrived at the frozen mountains that day, it only took her 3 days to go from meeting up with herself and others to grabbing the scepter and leaving. The Light Festival was originally scheduled to be held in the 15th day, so she had the place. With the dragon in hand, if she wanted to rush to kill several other escort teams within these 10 days, she would have enough time to do so. It's just that she killed the other candidate saints in this way, and she was the only one left alive. Anna couldn't have known this, so when the other candidate saints were all likely to die in her hands, she was the only one left. People survived, and the people in the temple were desperate. When the time comes, they will rush to the shelves. Even if they have not accomplished anything, did not get the scepter of light, and did not complete the trial, the temple will definitely choose themselves to become the saints when they have no other choice. Female. Anna is so determined to become a saint. What is she trying to do? If Anna had a conspiracy and wanted to promote herself to the position of saint, Lily became wary and took a deep look at Itchery. I don't know if he expected this early in the morning, so Anna was able to escape that day. For some reason, he and Anna had a brief confrontation. Lily felt that Arturi did not want to kill Anna at all. In this situation, she thought she wants to become a saint, but there is such an obvious pitfall in front of her. If she agrees to become a saint, she will fall into Anna's trap. If you don't become a saint. Then she wanted to leave with Arturi and return to his territory. She began to wonder if Arturi had planned all this, so she let Anna go, and now she placed a multiple choice question in front of her. Everything is waiting for her to choose. Marry him. Stay alive. Don't marry him. Go to hell. Thinking of this, Lily clenched her teeth. This mission was very grueling. The Arturi who appears in the plot is so cunning, so smart that he almost seems like a demon, and he really cheats people to death without repaying their lives. Two choices were placed in front of her. There was something wrong with the saint. If she insisted on going her own way, she might die in Anna's hands. This time the mission was over. She had worked hard for so long, which was equivalent to the end of her life here. If she chooses to evade wisely, then she falls into Arturi's trap and lets him get his wish. If she follows him, Anna may not be able to kill her. Then she will be the one who fails the mission this time, and she will survive. But relying on this method to complete the task is like opportunism, and Lily doesn't like this way of completing the task. She doesn't like this kind of passive avoidance, and a bit of irritability gradually appears in her expression. To Lee, this cunning fox is far deeper and more terrifying than Andrew and others. To achieve his goal, he does not use conspiracy but uses conspiracy. He puts the plan in front of him openly and openly. All choices are made by himself. He just wants to blame others. He couldn't find any reason or excuse. Somehow, Lily suddenly thought of Li Yangzi. He was also such a wise and demon-like figure. And now that he thought about it carefully, he seemed to have dug holes for himself without even realizing it. If he hadn't revealed it himself later, I'm afraid she wouldn't have realized it and realized that she had been taken advantage of by him. When she thought about it afterwards, it must have been her own fault and had nothing to do with him. Arturi's methods and methods of doing things are so similar to Li Yangzi. Thinking of him calling her Ziahe over and over again, and thinking of the intimate and close feeling she had after touching him, Lily's heart began to beat violently. That time she was separated from him because Sean Kong was attacked and he didn't know whether he was dead or alive. She remembered that Rong Li once said that if he went back, Li Yangzi would think of her. That word think by hey, I didn't think much about it, but now she was thinking deeply. Is it possible that Li Yangzi lost his memory? He was once trapped in a mission. Is it possible that after he was attacked last time, he was also trapped in a mission and lost his memory? This thought came to mind, and Lily was so excited that her hands and feet began to tremble. But all this is just her guess. If this kind of unfounded guess is wrong, the consequences will be earth-shaking, and she can't gamble. While Lily was deep in thought, Archbishop Andrew and others exchanged a few glances and quickly calmed down. Your Excellency, you can't say anything without any basis. After we consulted the gods for instructions from the Light Festival at the beginning, although the will of the Goddess of Light is not yet clear, it must be carried out in advance. You all know this. An archbishop faced Arturi's gaze and said bravely, but the goddess's oracles have not been so accurate recently, so we have not carried out the process for the time being. As for several candidate saints, although they have not returned yet, this does not mean that they must have had an accident. They have the most loyal knights guarding them, and they are conducting trials in a very safe place. There is no danger at all, so how could there be any accident? Explanation is a cover-up. If you don't feel guilty, why would you open your mouth and say so many words? Arturi grabbed Lily's hair in his palm, pierced a few fingers through her hair, and said lightly. If I am not mistaken, you have already started preparing for the sacrificial ceremony, and it has already started now, right? Just wait for Xiaohe to go out and be crowned, and officially become a saint in the temple, and it won't be long before the emperor may call me in palace. Do you want to tell me something? The end of his last sentence rose slightly, and the sweet and moving voice was like a jumping note, but at this time, the archbishops had no intention of thinking about whether his voice was beautiful or not. It was wonderful. His words broke through the last bit of pretense of the people in the temple, leaving a look of embarrassment on their faces. Grand Duke. Andrew tried to retort, but was speechless at all. At this time, the momentum of the people in the temple was completely suppressed by Arturi. He didn't want to listen to the nonsense of these old men at all. He was just playing around. Lily's hair, looking at her and smiling. So my girl, what do you think? What do you want? He stared at Lily again with that conniving look, as if everything had already been determined, as if nothing could shock him. There was a smile on the corner of his mouth, waiting for Lily's choice. Lily obviously wanted to ask him how he was doing, but now he abominably threw the question back to himself. Lily was so confused that there was a wolf before and a tiger behind, and there was no way to get the best of both worlds in a short period of time. There was a look of struggle in her eyes. Arturi looked at her for a long time. The indifference in his eyes, as if a chess player was watching the pieces struggling in his hands, gradually dissipated along with the emotion in her eyes. He sighed, as if he was holding a chess piece. Lily had no choice. He could cut off her wings and let her stay by his side. If she was unwilling, he could stand by and watch her die. But he didn't know if the two of them had ever been so close. His heart couldn't be like that anymore. She was so coldly calculating at the beginning, but he seemed helpless against her look. Okay, Your Excellency, you win. You are right. Something may have happened to the other girls in the temple. The Festival of Light is right in front of you. No more accidents can happen. Your Excellency, we know that you are in love with Miss Roman. But this time the temple cannot be without the saint, otherwise it will be a disaster for the temple. Please promise us that as long as Ms. Roman is willing to show up today, she will show up today as the saint of the Temple of Light. Then in the future, the temple will not interfere with her or use her in any of her affairs. After today, the temple will send her away in the name of the saint who wants to serve the goddess. Your Excellency, you can take her to any place at that time. The Temple of Light is forever grateful for your kindness for this, and whenever you need the Temple of Light in the future, we are willing to do our best to help. Andrew spoke slowly. At this time, he had nothing to do in front of the Grand Duke Achuri. Achuri was right. Something happened to all the other saints in the temple. So far, only Lily has survived. The temple there can be no more saints, otherwise this light festival will cause a huge joke. Now the reputation of the temple is not as good as it was back then. Since the accident of the last Saint Pope, the status and reputation of the Temple of Light has plummeted. It has gone from being complementary to the imperial power to now relying on the royal family. If there is another accident this time, then the reputation of the Temple of Light will be greatly reduced, and the people will be disappointed with the temple. By then, it will be too late to restore the reputation. We will find a way, and then all we have to do is elect new candidates. You see, if you are really willing to be so generous, we will praise your kindness and sing your greatness. The Temple of Light will always remember your kindness. Miss Roman belongs to you, so why are you, the Grand Duke, unwilling to agree to such a thing that has the best of both worlds? Andrew tried hard to persuade Achuri, and Lily sneered in her heart. Andrew was too anxious to discuss her ownership issue in front of her before he made a decision. So, what if I don't want to? Lily said slowly, and Andrew was stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting her to say such a thing. Arturi said nothing, just stared at her with a smile. The group of archbishops seemed to be unaware of the situation. Lily laughed, then, if I say that if the temple wants me to become a saint, it must find a way. Save my life, and I am not willing to leave with archduchetry. Every time, someone else gives her multiple choice questions. Now Lily is a little angry. Why can't she give multiple choice questions to others? To be continued.